The story kicks off on a rainy night in a massive building in the middle of the city. Inside, a young man named Soma Kazuya gets a bunch of paperwork thrown right in his face. Standing before him, his boss is screaming furiously, asking what the heck this garbage is, and if he's kidding. Even with the chewing out, our protagonist just apologizes and says the responsibility is all his. Then, another bald superior asks what he's laughing at, and if this is how he taught him. He tells him to read everything and warns him that he's not going home until the job is done. Soma then crouches down to pick up all the papers scattered on the floor. Meanwhile, his bosses are chatting, and one suggests the other go for a smoke break to chill out. Turns out, one of Soma's jobs was to take the fall for others, and the bald guy thanks him for covering for him. The superior explains that he was too swamped with meetings to get the proposals done. Basically, our protagonist's job was to be the team scapegoat. Seizing the moment, Soma asks about his promotion to a full-time position. The bald guy just brushes it off, saying they'll talk about it later, and tells him to focus on finishing the work first. The clock already reads 2 in the morning, and the guy is completely exhausted and in desperate need of a break. But he was stuck in that empty office because even if he wanted to, he couldn't rest. Alone in the office, he looks out at the city through the window and thinks about how beautiful it is. But unfortunately, in this city, if you don't have value, you're simply tossed out like trash. Back at his desk, the built-up fatigue finally starts to weigh on his shoulders. His body can't take it anymore, and he starts to collapse. In the end, our protagonist falls to the floor completely exhausted. Suddenly, he finds himself in a totally different place, sitting in a chair. Completely lost, he wonders where he is. A goddess then starts listing his personal information, identifying him as Soma Kazuya, a real estate marketing planner. She reveals that he was born on June 22nd, 1995, and passed away from overwork. And she reveals that he's exactly the kind of person she was looking for. Our protagonist, still confused by the situation, asks what's going on. The goddess explains that to live, a person needs 3 things: money, cats, and love, leaving Soma wondering why she even brought up cats. The goddess then whips out a giant hammer that weighs 100 tons, and with all her might she smashes love, saying someone like him doesn't need it. Right after, she does the same thing to money. And finally, she smashes the cats while our protagonist screams desperately for her to stop. The goddess points at him and says that all he ever did in life was grovel for others, so she has the perfect title for him. She introduces him as the ultimate corporate slave. Our protagonist thinks that hearing his pathetic life praised like this hurts more than kicking the bucket, but then he remembers he's already a goner and wonders if this is some kind of torture. Head down, he says he's new to this whole being dead thing and just wants her to let him move on. Seeing his attitude, the goddess gives him a swift kick to the face. Man, I wish you'd kick me like that. The goddess then says he's being reincarnated as a hero in another world, and Soma asks who the heck she is. She introduces herself as Omile, the administrator of the Calavir continent, or simply a goddess from another world. With that, our protagonist finds himself in front of a giant portal and thinks he's ended up in another job interview, only this time it was to become a hero. The portal windows swing open, and he's thrown out, and Soma starts plummeting in a full-on freefall. As he gets closer to the ground, he realizes he's going to land in a forest, and he starts screaming that he's going to be a goner. A moment later, he crashes down, sending dust flying everywhere. But before he goes splat on the ground, someone catches him. The woman who saved him then asks if Mr. Hero can't fly. The fall left our protagonist completely dizzy and out of it. Looking around, he realizes he really has been reincarnated in another world. They start walking down bumpy rock-filled roads. The architecture of the houses looks like something straight out of a medieval fantasy game. But what really catches his attention are the injured people scattered along the roadside. All the locals look tired and completely hopeless. He asks why there are only elderly people and children there, and the redhead explains that all the young people were lost in the war and that this town is the last place left on the continent. But even here, they're surrounded by the Demon Queen's army. She then leads him up a staircase, saying he needs to see the situation with his own eyes. Reaching the top, he looks through an opening in the wall and is shocked by the scene. Outside, a gigantic army of monsters is assembled. Soma backs away from the wall and wonders why a hero's journey has to start on the brink of destruction and not in some peaceful village. The truth is, most of the world has already been conquered by the Demon Queen, and Rockford is humanity's last stand, and the redhead with him is named Helga, and she says it's fine because their arrows can't reach them from that distance. I thought for sure her name would be Irza Scarlet. The army trying to resist is made up of injured elderly folks and children. Our protagonist thinks this is a surefire loss, but since he just got here, he can't really complain and just hopes Helga has a plan. He turns to her and asks if she has any strategy for this situation. The redhead replies that she does have a plan but thinks he was pretty rude for not even introducing himself. herself. In front of a blackboard, she starts explaining that the Demon Queen's army has 100,000 soldiers, while they only have 100 people, and according to her precise calculations, the solution is quite simple. If each person takes down 1,000 enemies, they win the battle. Soma gives a thumbs up while thinking she's a complete idiot, but Helga takes the gesture as a compliment and is happy that someone finally understands her logic. He then says there's a problem with her plan and asks how exactly they're supposed to take out 1,000 people each. Her answer is simple: just don't get taken out until you've taken out the 1,000. Soma gives another thumbs up while thinking that now he's absolutely sure she's a complete moron, and once again, Helga mistakes his thumbs up for praise and gets all excited for being complimented twice. Suddenly, someone pulls on our protagonist's cape, getting his attention. It was an injured boy who asks the hero if the goddess would forgive him if he passed on before taking down his 1,000 enemies. Meanwhile, Helga is shouting at the people of Rockfort, telling them they shouldn't fear their end, and one of the villagers refuses to obey. Our protagonist holds the boy's face and tells him to stop wiping his nose on his clothes and to eat more vegetables. Helga then says the goddess has a plan and that just the two of them will be enough to handle the situation. On the other side of the battlefield, a dark and imposing figure is addressed as Your Majesty by her subordinates. A blonde woman with glasses informs her queen that the rebels have just summoned a hero. With that, she adds that strangely, the hero and Helga are offering to surrender, and the demon queen seems intrigued by this, and even in the face of the demon army, the protagonist decided to leave the wall to surrender, and Helga explains that giving up the high ground to face a huge army is suicide, to which Soma replies that it's impossible for one person to take out 1,000. The guy asks if they'll really win if they can lure out the demon queen, and our protagonist, trembling, says it's all part of the strategy. At that moment, the demon queen finally arrives and stops right in front of them with a menacing aura. Soma is completely shocked to see that the crazy plan to lure out the demon queen actually worked. After Helga confirms that she's finally here, she starts gathering energy in her body, and blue lightning arcs around her. With that, she yells for them to go, and charges full speed at the demon queen, but suddenly our protagonist lands a kick right in her back. The blow sends her tumbling uncontrollably across the ground. The demon queen's advisor is completely baffled by what's happening. Right after, Soma gets on his knees and bows to the ground in a sign of surrender. Before the demon queen, he announces that he has captured the leader of the rebels, and then he makes a shameless proposal. He offers to work as a slave for the demon queen for the rest of his life. The dark being stares him down and asks what benefit she would gain from accepting his surrender. Our protagonist breaks out in a cold sweat, thinking things have gone south and wondering if he caught the queen at a bad time. Suddenly, a sword is thrown in their direction. One of the swords sticks in the ground right in front of the kneeling Helga, and the demon queen says she will give Helga the chance to challenge her. A tense atmosphere hangs in the air, and a battle was about to begin. Meanwhile, our protagonist is hiding in a bush with the advisor, wondering if he should just stay there. He greets her and thinks she's definitely his type. Back to the fight, Helga's sword begins to glow, and furious, she screams that she'll make her regret it. An aura begins to form around her, and our protagonist gets nervous as he remembers the goddess said Helga was a powerhouse comparable to the heroes of the past, and the best swordswoman in the world. The goddess Omile had explained that in a one-on-one fight, Helga could even defeat the queen. Before her, the demon queen remains motionless, just watching her movements. Helga then charges at her full speed, ready to strike. With a single blow, she unleashes a powerful slash at the demon queen. The force of the attack is so great it sends our protagonist flying, and he screams that she's like a human missile. Seeing the scene, the advisor asks Soma to tell Helga that she's always admired her. The blow hits dead on and causes a gigantic explosion of aura. However, Helga is completely stunned. Before her, the demon queen is completely unharmed, without a single scratch. Turns out, she stopped the blow using just 2 fingers. The demon queen then says she regrets even bothering to block such a weak attack. With the entire battlefield destroyed around them, she says she'll give her one more chance. In a flashback, we see Helga was wrapped in a kind of demonic binding that drained her mana. It was a seal that continuously siphoned her power, and she would have to wear it until the moment she faced the demon queen. The idea was that when the binding was released, all the mana that had been absorbed until then would return to her all at once. Back in the present, the bindings begin to unravel from her body, releasing an overwhelming blue energy. The seals shatter with explosive force, and the bindings expand infinitely, transforming into a massive attack. The demon queen just watches the technique approach. Then, the bindings strike the ground with tremendous force. Shocked by the scene, Soma comments that the demon queen is being pushed back and wonders if he surrendered too soon. Helga's technique not only seals and absorbs the opponent's mana, but also allows her to control it freely. With the bindings restraining the demon queen, she prepares for the final blow. Helga screams that if she can get her eyes, she wins the fight, and with her sword she charges directly for her enemy's left eye. But at the last second, the demon queen turns her head, and the blade hits the side of her head. In a desperate effort, Helga tries to force the sword through her opponent, but with brutal strength, the dark being grabs the blade and stops it from advancing. Our protagonist yells for Her Majesty to be careful, while the advisor complains, "Hey, that was my line." The demon queen then unleashes her full aura. The explosion is so powerful it even hits the soldiers of her own army. The monsters can barely withstand that insane aura. An explosion of energy destroys everything around them. The advisor looks at our protagonist with contempt and wonders why the goddess would choose someone so useless to be the hero. In a flashback, we see the silhouettes of 5 heroes, and a voice tells Helga that they will defeat the demon queen together. But of all the heroes, only Helga was left. Even being the last one standing, she prepares to continue the fight. On the other side, the demon queen reveals herself, saying that she broke her favorite helmet. Helga is in shock seeing the face behind the mask and can't believe her eyes. With a trembling voice, she murmurs the goddess's name. Moments later, Helga was completely defeated. Having her head taken off with a single blow, our protagonist falls to his knees, completely terrified, and wonders why. The demon queen's face is identical to the goddess's. With a cold gaze, the dark being approaches him and asks her question again, questioning what merit there would be in accepting his surrender. Soma thinks he doesn't have time to worry about the relationship between the goddess and the demon queen, because if he doesn't give a satisfactory answer, he'll be next. The advisor looks at him with contempt and says that now that Helga is gone, there's no valid reason for betrayal. And with one last look of disdain, she bids farewell to her pathetic comrade. Before the demon queen, our protagonist begins to whimper in fear. The sound catches the advisor's attention, who turns to him with a surprised expression, and our protagonist's whimper of fear turns into a loud, desperate bark. He throws his head back and starts barking non-stop like a crazed dog. The advisor is shocked to realize he's given up on making excuses and has gone all in on the dog act. Before the army of monsters, the demon queen finds the hero amusing and asks if he really hates being a hero that much. With a smile on her lips, she lets out a small laugh, enjoying the scene. The advisor then understands that instead of giving Her Majesty the answer she wanted, he chose the one she would never expect. And so, the demon queen accepts him and tells him to show the whole world the honor of being her dog. Soma lifts his head with a completely insane look and continues to bark. On the ground, Helga's head has one last thought, wondering why the goddess would choose an incompetent to be the hero. As her vision fades, showing the silhouette of the demon queen and her new servant. Before reincarnation, our protagonist was feeling pretty stylish with his new tie, and with his hero boots that shone brighter than anything. He thought all the suffering of his past life was for him to reach this moment, and with open arms, he declares that he has finally found his destiny. But the goddess Amal rains on his parade and tells him to stop feeling himself and listen to the plan. Turns out, for the last 500 years, all the heroes she sent were taken out by the demon queen. She's very blunt and says that in a one-on-one fight, he'd lose for sure, so Soma asks why not just summon a bunch of heroes at once. A talking book appears and explains that there can only be one hero and one demon queen per dimension. The book even calls Amal an idiot and asks if she forgot the basic logic of the world. Angry, the goddess punches the book and tells our protagonist to shut up too. She complains that's like an investor expecting a huge return on a small investment, while Soma just enjoys the drama. But Amal lets out a little laugh and says she found a bug in the system. She says that this time the strategy will be different, and the guy asks if it's because he has no talent, and she threatens to smack him. The goddess then reveals her genius plan. The rules say only one hero can exist, but what if that hero had the power to summon all the heroes of the past? A god's ability is to summon a hero, and the hero's ability is granted by the goddess according to their talent. She asks what would happen if she gave a talentless guy like him the ability to summon heroes. Soma gets hyped up at the idea and shouts that he'd basically be a god, and Amal agrees with him with an excited shout. With this, they could just jump her with all the legendary heroes, guaranteeing victory. But the guy raises a point: what if the demon queen just runs and hides? The goddess calls him clumsy and says she thought of that too. That's why she prepared a bottle with a golden liquid. She explains that the liquid paralyzes the body for 1 minute, and if he throws it on the demon queen when she's distracted. Soma realizes that with this, he could easily defeat the demon queen. With a sly grin, he already starts thinking about what he'll do afterward, and he imagines himself ruling over the world as the king chosen by God. He brags to the goddess, saying that despite appearances, he's good at management, and he offers to take care of this world's operations, saying he's addicted to business simulation games. But Amal cuts him off and yells that he's got it all wrong because as soon as he defeats the demon queen, he's a goner. She explains that his mission is simple: reincarnate, find the demon queen, summon the heroes, burn out his life, and then drop. The goddess then reveals that he's not the one who will use the liquid, but Helga because she will be the one to rule the world after the demon queen is defeated. A tear rolls down our protagonist's eye upon hearing this. He falls into despair and screams how she can so casually ask him to go through that again, and he asks if she doesn't consider that even trash is feelings. With his head down, he mutters that he'll have nothing then, and says he won't even get the chance to have anything. The goddess watches him in silence for a moment, and then bursts out laughing, finding him ridiculous. She hugs him and says that of course she has a plan for that. He apologizes for showing his pathetic side, and thinks that she's a goddess and wouldn't treat him like his boss from his previous life. Omile then reveals that he was actually destined to become a common ant in his next life, and not just any ant, but a sterile worker ant. With a snap of her fingers, she crushes the ant in her hand, but if he cooperates, she'll turn him into a bee in his next life. It will still be a sterile worker bee, but at least he won't live in a dark cave. As a bee, he could see the sun, the flowers, and have hope, but he asks if he can't become human again, even if it means having the same pathetic fate as his previous life. With a smile, she says his ancestors didn't have enough good karma. They're in a library surrounded by books, and the tension between them is palpable. The goddess gets irritated and yells at him to stop complaining, because just being involved in this operation is an honor. With his hand raised, he says he understands, and with a grim face, he finally agrees to do what she wants. The goddess prepares to transfer the power to him, and with open arms, she tells him to receive her power. A purple energy envelopes him, and he starts screaming in pain. He complains that she didn't warn him it would hurt so much. With his eyes bulging, he wonders if she just thought she didn't need to mention it. Bored, Amal yawns and asks if it's over yet. She warns him that the teleportation portal is already open and tells him to hurry up. With a grim face, our protagonist sits in the chair while receiving the power. He says he's realized a certain truth, and explains that his miserable life wasn't the result of neglecting his efforts. He just entrusted his life to things like rules, justice, and the judgment of his superiors. And he thanks the goddess for making him realize that to defeat an invincible demon queen and change a garbage life, the book approach just won't cut it. The goddess asks if he's lost his mind and what he's muttering about. Suddenly, he smashes the bottle over her head with all his might. Shocked, she falls to the floor and asks why he hit her. The goddess can barely keep her eyes open, and is furious that a commoner like him did this to her. And with her eyes glowing with rage, she decides to turn him into a maggot. And not just a maggot but a larva. With a bloody face, she screams for him to spend the rest of his life buried in trash. But before she can do anything, he pours the paralyzing liquid all over her, and he pours out every last drop. Paralyzed, she thinks that if she gets soaked in the liquid, she won't be able to move for a minute. Our protagonist says that her angry expression while being helpless is the same one he saw in the mirror every morning. With a face full of hate, Amal thinks she just has to hold on for 1 minute. He then grabs her face forcefully and forces her to drink the rest of the liquid from the bottle. He says she chose him because she thought someone who died from overwork would be easy to manipulate, and that she must be thinking about how to get revenge. But he's not going to give her that chance. With determination in his eyes, he says he's decided that he will never again let things go according to someone else's plan, and he forces the bottle into her mouth once more. With this decision, he says goodbye to his old diligent self, and he begins to beat her mercilessly. His hands turn red from the violence, and after unloading all his rage, he throws up on the floor. He thinks he just took out a god and has gone from trash to trash who's committed a major sin. But if he can even take out a god, and it's already decided he'll be a larva in his next life, what does he have to fear now? Kneeling before the demon queen, he declares that he will defeat her and live a life far more intense than anyone else. With an insane look, he shouts that he will reign at the top of this world and become the new demon king. Meanwhile, the books in the library panic over the death of the dimensional manager and decide to execute the emergency plan. The talking book is shocked and asks where this so-called plan is. The scene shifts to the capital of the kingdom, Auberville. In the kingdom's diet building, Soma swears to work himself to the bone and carry out the missions given by the demon queen, but the demon queen cuts him off and says she hasn't given him any missions. Our protagonist is surprised and completely confused. The kingdom's advisors comment that the position of tax department captain is lower than a palace guard and wonder why he's being appointed to a place like that. The story then flashes back 1 month to when Soma joined the demon queen's camp, and we see him being treated like a dog, jumping through a flaming hoop. The advisor whips him and shouts that from now on, he's the demon queen's dog. Lying on the ground, he asks if she doesn't know what a metaphor is, but she replies that the kingdom banned the use of ambiguous literary expressions a long time ago, and that when she says he'll become a dog, she means it literally. She then tells him to get up and says the next thing is bite training. Our protagonist complains about the treatment he's receiving while licking the advisor's leg. I want to be that dog, too. She gets annoyed and slaps him across the face, asking where he thinks he's licking. Passed out on the grass, he's left alone on the field. He remembers the advisor saying that he prioritized the lives of the people of Rockford over military gains, and he recalls the boy who asked if the goddess would forgive him if he passed on. He admits he was just trying to act like a hero. Suddenly, a bowl full of cubed meat is thrown in front of him. The advisor tells him to eat and explains that it's not dog food, but canned meat for officers. She then gives him some advice and tells him to follow the Demon Queen's instructions absolutely, because if he's obedient, he'll have a chance. Staring at the bowl of food, our protagonist understands that since then, he's stopped making a single complaint. He woke up earlier than any military dog and performed surveillance more diligently than any military dog. More than any military dog, he dedicated himself to training. As a result, he received the honorable task of guarding the Demon Queen's tent at night. It took human ancestors 4.5 million years to go from walking on all fours to walking on 2 feet. Soma went from being a military dog to the captain of the kingdom's 6th squad of the tax department in 45 days. And that brings us to the present, where the advisors wonder what Her Majesty is thinking. The advisor explains that now that the kingdom has no more enemies, Her Majesty is trying to let someone who doesn't belong to any faction handle internal affairs. With a sly grin, our protagonist thinks to himself not to miss his chance. He walks through the city streets and thinks that if he stands out too much, he'll become a target. He reflects that even though he took the position, he hasn't received any instructions from the Demon Queen, which means if things go well, she gets the credit, and if they go wrong, it's his fault. He shouts in frustration that it's just like his previous life and wonders why he was even reincarnated. But he pulls himself together and says he won't fall into a loser mindset and needs to stay positive while holding back a vendor trying to sell his product. He thinks that from his perspective, any turning point is a win and that maybe the situation isn't as bad as he imagines. He rings the doorbell and the door opens. 2 elf girls appear and ask if he's the new captain of the 6th squad. Our protagonist is completely captivated by their beauty. They take him by the hand and invite him in. He excitedly thinks that this is the first time he's held a girl's hand, and he already starts thinking about names for the children they'll have together. One of the elves hands him a paper and asks him to sign the paperwork. He responds excitedly, "Yes, and we can get married." Both of them stomp on his foot hard for that comment. The blonde elf confirms that with his signature, he is officially the captain and that now he can meet his end. Suddenly, he finds himself in an execution yard and wonders why he's there. He then shouts, "You want my treasure? You can have it." The guards tell him to shut up and ask what he's babbling about. An officer appears and announces that the 6th squad of the tax department ranks last in performance every year, and that in the name of the acting director. The following sentence is passed. Vice Captain Hammond cries desperately, saying he worked for the good of the kingdom. Squad member Merit is tied up and suspended in the air, and the squad's mascot, a panda named Panda, calmly eats bamboo. And Soma, the newly appointed captain, is about to be executed. The officer shouts that they are all sentenced to their end. With a wicked smile, he reveals that this is an example for the others, but his wig falls off, and one of the guards points it out. Our protagonist yells that workplace bullying has reached its final form. The officer quickly glues his wig back on and introduces himself as Grifano of the most historic pure blood elf clan and says he will be the man to end him while complaining about the glue on his hand. In a flashback, the advisor warns him to be careful with a man named Grifano. He replies sarcastically for her to be careful with his leash. The advisor explains that Grifano has had his eye on the director position for a long time, and that he showed up at a crucial moment, and that he will undoubtedly be a target. He then asks what plan his backer, Lady Marie, has in mind. The advisor then reveals she has 2 good plans for the situation. The first is a frontal assault, and Soma Kazuya mockingly repeats the elf's name. So, the guy asks if Grifano is a pet's name and complains that the elf brags about his lineage all the time. He continues shouting that back in his hometown, only farmers care about that kind of thing. At this, one of the guards tells him to shut up and points a gun, while another defends Grifano, saying he's a perfect gentleman aside from his thinning hair. With a dark look, our protagonist starts laughing and reveals that first, he was forged by the goddess. From there, he went through rigorous training as a military dog under the command of the Demon Queen. Because of that, not even he knows how strong he's become now. His squad mates get excited and shout that the new captain seems strong and that they're all saved. Grifano's guards are completely intimidated by the aura emanating from the guy. His cuffed hands begin to glow with a reddish energy, and he questions if they really think they can take him out. With a swift move, he shatters the cuffs using only his raw strength. Right after, Mr. Hero charges at high speed towards one of the soldiers. The terrified guard shoots, but our protagonist dodges the bullet with no difficulty. In a fluid motion, he grabs the soldier and throws him over his shoulder with ease. The soldier's body is slammed to the ground as the other guards stand frozen. The 2 remaining soldiers look on in shock, not knowing how to react. Without wasting a moment, our protagonist grabs another guard's leg. With that, he spins him in the air with impressive speed. In this way, the guy grabs the soldier's rifle and points it at his comrade. Then, he pulls the trigger without hesitation. The guard's silhouette is hit dead on, and the guy counts, "That's 1." Another soldier is caught in a headlock and yells for them not to move or he'll bite. Our protagonist then uses the rifle butt to hit him square in the face and says, "That's 2." He kneels over the body of the guard on the ground. The remaining elves shout not to panic because the gun is firing blanks. Faced with this revelation, our protagonist throws the rifle like a javelin. The weapon hits the ground with tremendous force, creating a shockwave, and he declares, "That was 3. Now only Griffono is left standing, facing the captain on a devastated battlefield. The elf's hand trembles with fear as he tries to draw his weapon. Desperate, Griffono draws a pistol and shoots while yelling for him to drop. However, our protagonist doesn't even flinch, and the bullet ricochets off his chest, causing no damage. The sound of the shot echoes through the area. The projectile shatters into sparks against the guy's body, who remains standing in the same spot. At this, the elf is completely terrified while Mr. Hero stares him down coldly. With a quick blow, the captain knocks Griffono to the ground, leaving him utterly defeated. After witnessing his strength, all the soldiers bow in respect and chant his name. The 2 elf girls from the 6th squad declare their love for him with hearts in their eyes. The other team members are also impressed and celebrate the arrival of their new leader. Even Griffono's soldiers raise their fists and swear eternal loyalty to the guy. But Soma flashes a completely insane smile and tells them all to shut up because they're ugly. The soldiers are confused, and one asks if he's gone crazy or caught some disease. An electric aura surrounds our protagonist, and he says that if they're going to use force, his cuffed hands glow with red energy again, and he continues, saying that pity, and with a burst of power, he shatters the chains, shouting that mercy is out of the question. At this, our protagonist charges forward and comments with surprise that they really did attack. He then complains that they didn't even shoot, and that he wasted energy dodging for nothing. So, the guy slides across the ground at high speed towards one of the guards, but suddenly he takes a punch right to the face. The blow is so strong that blood goes flying everywhere. Right after he's hit by the butt of a rifle, the silhouette of a soldier shows him landing a kick on our protagonist. The kick sends him flying back with so much force that he knocks over the other soldiers like bowling pins. His squad mates despair and shout that the new captain is a wimp and that they're finished. Lying upside down on the ground, the guy announces that Plan A, the frontal assault, has failed and now it's time to start Plan B. The guy is thrown violently and slides across the ground, kicking up dust, while Griffono's soldiers just watch. With a disdainful expression, Griffono stares at him intently. Then the elf bursts out laughing, finding the whole situation hilarious. Lying on the ground, our protagonist hears the elf wonder if that was all the strength he had. Suddenly, a shot hits the ground right next to the guy's head. With his gun raised, Griffono makes a proposal to the captain. He tells the guy to get on his knees and bark like a dog, just like when he met the demon queen, and in return, he'll spare his life. The elf thinks that this will ruin Soma's chances of being promoted to director of the tax department. His companion Hammond desperately shouts for the captain to admit defeat as his life is on the line and there's no shame in it, but our protagonist calls Hammond by name and says the reason he became a dog was so that no one else would have to, and his squad mate is left completely confused. Griffono's soldiers mock him, wondering why he's acting so cool even though he's in deep trouble. Suddenly, the guy's body begins to levitate, leaving all the soldiers shocked. With that, he starts howling like a wolf under a red, rainy sky. Meanwhile, in the advisor's room, she sleeps peacefully, surrounded by several dogs. Our protagonist's howl echoes through the city, and the dogs sleeping with the advisor leap off the bed in a flash. With that, the blonde woman is left alone in bed, all disheveled after being abandoned by her pets. Like black blurs, the dogs race through the city streets at high speed towards the execution yard. One of the dogs leaps over a rooftop and continues on its way to its destination. They cross the empty streets of the capital without stopping for a second. Then another dog jumps between buildings with impressive agility. With that, the pack gets closer and closer to the execution site. Meanwhile, Griffono taunts our protagonist, saying he's still lying down and that it's not looking good, but suddenly, an explosion of smoke and dust erupts right in front of them, cutting him off. The force of the explosion blows the elves' hair back, leaving them all completely terrified. Griffono turns in surprise and wonders who those figures are that just arrived. Before them, a group of dogs with glowing red eyes emerges from the smoke, and the elf recognizes them as the Demon Queen's beloved dogs. Completely shocked, he shouts and questions how the guy can command Her Majesty's dogs. Our protagonist replies that it's a stupid question because they are colleagues bound by mutual love, and explains that until he officially takes office, he is treated as a military dog. With a wicked smile, he wonders what crime Griffono would be accused of if he were to harm the Demon Queen's dog. The guy answers that the crime is treason, as one of the dogs with a gold collar lunges forward and bites a soldier's arm. Then, a Rottweiler with glowing red eyes grabs another guard's leg, continuing the word. And to finish the sentence, a smaller dog with a spiked collar leaps onto the last soldier's neck. One of the smaller dogs even takes the opportunity to bite a very inconvenient spot on one of the fallen guards. Meanwhile, the largest dog in the pack clamps down on Griffono's head, leaving the elf completely immobilized. Even with his head in the dog's mouth, Griffono shouts that using the Demon Queen's property is a capital crime, and that our protagonist now belongs to the tax department. With his back to the scene, Mr. Hero tells the elf girl to take a good look at the signature he made. The two girls look at the paper and are completely shocked to realize that's not his real name. The guy then reveals that was the name he planned to give their future son and that it's a shame. With eyes full of tears, the blonde elf is completely moved by the revelation. The girl then collapses to the ground and cries that she missed her chance to find true love. While the other elf comforts her, the captain walks away and tells her to cheer up because he's single too. With his face red with anger, Grifano thinks that as a long-lived elf with a lot of experience in surrendering, he continues his thought as his eyes close in concentration. Every muscle in his face moves instantly to form the best possible expression of surrender. The elf then flashes a desperate fawning smile, still with his head in the dog's mouth. Grifano tries to say that it was all just a welcoming prank, but our protagonist just holds the pistol he had taken from Grifano and says that the kingdom banned the use of ambiguous expressions a long time ago, and if he said to take him out, then he must take him out. At this, the captain takes Grifano's hand and points the gun at his own head. The elf's hand begins to tremble nervously as our protagonist stares at him with a serious look. With all his might, the guy yells for him to just shoot already. He repeats that the kingdom doesn't allow for ambiguity and that the order was clear. And once more, he challenges the elf to pull the trigger without hesitation. Grifano is completely confused and wonders why the guy isn't acting like him, because they should be the same. In a flashback, we see that despite being born into a prestigious family, Grifano's childhood was marked by the slander of the masses. People whispered behind his back, saying that his highness was a complete incompetent. He was called spoiled, and everyone doubted the future of the elves under his leadership. During one of his training sessions, he ends up hitting his butler with an arrow, and to become a man worthy of the throne, he joined Helga's group of heroes. He even offered Helga the chance to become his subordinate. At that time, he believed he would slay the demon queen as a hero and take the beautiful Helga as his wife. But the redhead tears up the love letter he wrote and says she despises men who write that kind of thing. Because of that, after having his heart broken and falling into darkness, Helga abandons him on his knees on the ground. He then tried to win Helga over by borrowing the demon queen's power and surrendered. Before her majesty, he shouts that he surrendered of his own free will and asks why he is being treated this way. The demon queen then questions what benefit his surrender would bring her. Desperate, the elf tries to say that his lord is invincible, but a hot, red substance is poured on his head, making him scream in pain. The liquid runs down his body and begins to burn his clothes. Lying on the ground, the demon queen says that if he understands, he shouldn't waste any more of her time. Even after falling to the status of a mere dog, he attempted one last military feat to turn the tables. Kneeling before her majesty, he offers to persuade Helga to surrender without bloodshed, but in the middle of the battle, other people start waving white flags, ruining his plan. The demon queen walks past him lying on the ground and says he's in her way. Back in the present, he remembers that he obtained his current position by offering a vast amount of treasure to one person, and now they intend to take everything from him. Full of tears, the elf screams that it's not fair and questions why our protagonist is the only one to receive the demon queen's favors since they are both traitors. He continues his furious speech as an aura of blue energy envelops him, complaining that he's being treated like trash. Faced with the elf's outburst of anger, our protagonist thinks with a victorious air that this is his victory. In a flashback, the advisor reveals to the guy that she has two good plans for the situation. She explains that plan A is a frontal assault while showing the teeth of a dog. Next, she reveals that plan B is to beg for forgiveness as they wouldn't take out a servant of the demon queen. Our protagonist rejects the plans and explains that to maintain his facultative strength, he needs to act like an arrogant rookie who let the power go to his head. With a completely insane expression, he asserts that he needs to be arrogant and overbearing for the plan to work. Back in the present, Grifano unleashes an overwhelming aura of blue energy as he faces our protagonist. The pressure of the energy is so strong that the guy can barely breathe in the face of the magical power emanating from the elf. While the demon queen's dogs attack Grifano's soldiers, our protagonist thinks that this person's subordinates are much stronger than the dogs. He knows they could take him out with a single shot, but don't dare to because they suspect he's a confidant of her majesty, so he decides to bluff them to the very end. At this, the guy shouts and asks if no one has ever told Grifano before. With a mocking expression, he continues his shout, saying that with that face, the elf is ugly with or without hair. The two elf girls from the 6th squad are shocked, and he just made fun of Grifano's most sensitive issue and that he's definitely going to get shot. Grifano's soldiers desperately shout for him to shoot the guy and end it once and for all. With a face full of hate, Grifano grinds his teeth and swears he will never forgive this, but suddenly, the elf has a realization and notices something strange about the situation. He starts to wonder if the guy pretended to be an idiot and acted weak on purpose to make everyone believe they could take him out at any moment. A drop of sweat runs down the elf's face as he begins to understand the plan. He realizes that behind this subservient man lies a gigantic shadow cast by the kingdom's top brass. The image of a giant, crazed Soma appears in the elf's mind. Grifano understands that this guy isn't human but rather the demon queen's trusted dog, a tool to purge officials, and his true weapon isn't strength but his backing. At this, Grifano wonders what the heck he plans to do with two knives. With impressive speed, the guy lunges forward, and several red energy slashes surround Grifano's head. In the blink of an eye, all of the elf's hair is cut off, leaving him completely bald and shocked. One of Grifano's soldiers screams in horror that he shaved their lord's head. Our protagonist says that in the name of the Demon Queen, he will correct Grifano's vanity so that he never again spends the people's tax money on useless wigs. The elf bites his lip so hard that it starts to bleed, completely humiliated. With blood running down his head, Grifano finally understands that he can't take him out. With Grifano's blood splattered on the ground, our protagonist admires the scene and says it's a magnificent sight. He thinks that with this, everyone will believe he is the confident and dog of the Demon Queen, and that this arrogance is the camouflage that protects him. Suddenly, a black hole appears in the sky, and a voice says, "Found you." A crack opens in the sky above the city, and red lightning begins to fall everywhere. A gigantic eye appears in the crack, observing everything happening below. The eye then reveals itself as a monstrous creature floating above the city and says, "You killed the goddess bug." Our protagonist just replies that it's fine and that the inauguration ceremony is over. Suddenly, everyone around him freezes in strange poses, and time seems to have stopped. The guy wonders why no one is moving and is confused by the situation. One of the Demon Queen's dogs falls frozen on top of an equally paralyzed soldier. Everyone in the yard is motionless like statues amidst the chaotic scene. He realizes he can't move either and complains that he's so close to scratching an itch that's driving him crazy and wonders if this is a mass sleep paralysis event. The creature in the sky then finds him and calls him the little bug who murdered the goddess. The creature's voice calls him by name and warns him not to think he can live in peace after what he's done. The being then reveals itself as the talking book and complains about the amount of overtime he had to do to clean up the mess the guy caused. The book complains that he even has dark circles now from working so much. Suddenly, clouds start falling from the sky like a flood over the city. The scene becomes very similar to the fortress in the clouds where the goddess lived. Our protagonist runs in desperation and wonders if the creature is after him. He is then suspended in the air upside down by cloud tentacles. Several red light beams appear around him, trapping him completely, but suddenly, a mysterious figure cuts the light beams and frees him. The Demon Queen appears and crouches over him, thanking him for the bounty and saying that it hurt. The talking book comments that as expected from the champion who unified the world, not even the time stop works on her. With her sword in hand, Her Majesty asks the book, which is named Anaphon, why she can't sense Amal's presence. Our protagonist finally remembers that voice and realizes it's the noisy book from the Cloud Fortress and wonders if it came to punish him for taking out the goddess. But Anaphon replies that she is no longer the administrator of the dimensions and has no right to know. The guy is completely shocked to find out the Demon Queen's name. Her Majesty observes the accumulating clouds and asks if the book plans to attack her as well. Anaphon replies that she is underestimating divine power. With a swift move, the Demon Queen cuts the clouds around her with her sword. She charges forward and cuts through the web of red beams that held her. With a challenging smile, she asks Anaphon if that's all he's got. She then unceremoniously tosses our protagonist aside. Floating amidst the clouds, Her Majesty prepares for combat. She steps on a cloud and leaps with impressive force. Several beams of light are fired in her direction, but she dodges them all with agility. Anaphon then launches a direct attack against her. The Demon Queen faces the attack with determination in her eyes. With a single blow, she stops the energy beam using only her sword. The impact causes a gigantic explosion of blue energy around her. She stares at the book with a serious and challenging look. Anaphon gets angry and tells her not to get cocky. Dark lightning charge clouds form around her. At this, the Demon Queen shouts that this is mortal strength. Several golden points of light appear throughout the city, illuminating the streets. The points of light spread across the night sky like stars. They then join together to form a bright, golden crown. The crown lands on the Demon Queen's head as she holds her sword with determination. She then charges forward and unleashes a devastating, colorful energy beam. The attack pierces through the clouds and hits Anaphon dead on. With a wicked smile, Her Majesty watches her attack hit the target. Anapfon's eye is struck by blue and red energy, but the book reveals that she is as foolish as Omile, because its true body is not there, and she cannot touch it. Our protagonist watches the scene from afar and complains that the time stop happened again. Surrounded by clouds, he shouts that it's a home invasion. He complains that the clouds are invading all his orifices. Desperate, he shouts Her Majesty's name again, and continues shouting that it's a robbery as the clouds swallow him. The Demon Queen stares at the book with a furious look and asks if he is determined to end her. The Demon Queen spins in the air and dives towards the ground with her sword in hand. She advances with impressive speed, leaving a trail of red energy behind. With a devastating impact, she hits the ground and causes an explosion of debris. Amidst the rubble, she emerges unscathed, her long white hair flowing. Our protagonist thanks Her Majesty for protecting his chastity. Sinister red clouds form in the sky above the city. The demon queen stares at the sky with a serious look and declares that this is the strength of Gaia. A giant gate adorned with skulls emerges from the ground, the Gate of Hades. With a voice command, Her Majesty orders the gate to open, and skeletal hands begin to push it. A skeleton with a glowing blue eye peeks through the crack of the gate. From within the gate emerges a giant skeletal being with multiple heads, enveloped in blue flames. The skull Seraphis. The creature reveals itself completely, showing its imposing and terrifying form. Lying on the ground, our protagonist thinks the best thing to do is play dead. Several skeletal hands rush forward at high speed. The hands grab the clouds and tear them apart with tremendous force. Antiphon finally understands the situation. As expected of the monarch who unified the world, he realizes that she possesses both mortal strength and the strength of Gaia. He then comments that Almail seems to have misjudged her power, and so it's no wonder Helga was taken out so brutally. The demon queen says that when he realized it was impossible for a hero to stop her, she questions if he abandoned the Cloud Fortress in a fit of rage and fled this dimension where he tasted humiliation. She continues her speech and says that in the end, he issued a selfish order to take out the bug that surrendered to her. While our protagonist complains about his butt hurting, Antiphon says she's wrong about everything and that both the guy and Almail were idiots. He reveals that she probably doesn't even suspect that Almail was taken out by Soma and says she has no right to know. The demon queen then tells him to become her servant once more. The skull Seraphis prepares to attack. With a blast of ice, the creature freezes everything around it. Antiphon is hit dead on, and its body is frozen and shattered. The Cloud Fortress begins to materialize in the sky. Antiphon then realizes that she has dragged him there. The skull Seraphis uses its blue flames to melt the surrounding ice. A wave of blue energy emanates from the demon queen, destroying everything around her. With a completely insane smile, she celebrates that it's finally happening. Antiphon says that until she becomes a god, the Cloud Fortress is an illusion she will never possess because it is where the gods dwell. The clouds begin to dissipate in the night sky. The Cloud Fortress dissolves into a flock of white birds. The demon queen stares at the skull Seraphis as the fortress disappears. She then understands that she cannot become a god unless she does it the hard way. Antiphon says he's waiting for her, and our protagonist complains that his butt suddenly clenched. Aniphon's eye begins to crack and shatter. The skull Seraphis then dissolves amidst the debris. With the time stop deactivated, our protagonist celebrates that he can now move. The demon queen's dogs resume their attack on Griffono's soldiers, and the elf screams for them not to bite him. With his face full of scratches, Griffono screams desperately. Suddenly, one of the dogs jumps on his face and attacks him violently. Our protagonist sits amidst the bodies of the soldiers and debris, completely shocked by the scene. Griffono's soldiers are all defeated by the demon queen's dogs. Our protagonist watches the carnage with a shocked look. Her Majesty says that this is the damage from when time stopped. A gigantic explosion happens in the distance. A man in a suit says that approaching level 50 is like approaching a monster. Our protagonist desperately shouts the name of a group called F1. He continues shouting and wonders why the reinforcements haven't arrived yet. One of the members of the 6th squad shouts that it's because they're weak. The guy is then thrown into the air and spins. A man with boxing gloves hits him with a powerful punch. A woman in workout clothes kicks him with impressive force. A group of 3 men with star-shaped sunglasses appears in a stylish pose. The 6th squad member complains that they are too weak compared to F1. The woman in workout clothes jumps over the other in a fighting pose. Our protagonist desperately shouts for them to move quickly. Our protagonist barks while bowing to his mistress. The demon queen praises him, saying he's a good dog. Then, she tells him to go clean up the mess that happened in Mary's place. With a sweaty face, the guy wonders how he's going to explain all that damage. Her Majesty tells him to make something up, like a natural disaster or a huge brawl. With that, the captain is left speechless at her suggestion. Amidst the destroyed city, he realizes he's going to have to improvise. The scene then shifts to a night with a crescent moon. Suddenly, a small white creature starts vomiting a blue liquid. The liquid instantly freezes a window while 2 other creatures watch. Soon after, a whole horde of these beings attacks a building, causing a fire. Marie arrives on the scene and is shocked by the destruction, asking what happened there. A man with a goatee explains that he knelt down and sneezed, and in the next instant, the building just collapsed. The man then suggests that his superpowers have awakened, but a blue-haired woman says there's no way. At the joke, the man with the goatee shouts that she doesn't know anything, while the blue-haired woman tries to calm him down. Then, the blue-haired woman and a man observe the destruction, and she comments that the cuts are clean, as if made by a sword. She adds that the residual mana in the air contains the disturbing aura of the underworld. From there, Marie shouts for everyone to be quiet. Panda then says the woman was right, but if he hadn't blocked the attack, everyone would have been devoured. One of the squad's elves was caught by one of the creatures, and says that bodies are eaten, decomposed, and become nutrients for nature, and in the end, they turn into droppings. Marie hugs Panda and thanks him for saving everyone. The mascot blushes and is happy with the affection. The man with the goatee and the blue-haired woman watch the scene, and the woman translates what Panda is saying, asking Marie to stop. The blue-haired woman explains that since she was a high-class courtesan, she can understand any male, be it human or panda. Hammond approaches and calls Marie queen, saying she has been by the demon queen's side for so long. She interrupts him and asks him to stop using that title since the human kingdom has been destroyed. With a dark look, Marie tells him not to come closer because she is the traitor who sold out her master to save her own honor. Meanwhile, our protagonist is working at a desk amidst the rubble, and someone asks where he is, being told that he's doing a thankless task. With a thumbs up, our protagonist tells a woman that her daughter's father passed on bravely protecting the demon queen. The little girl starts to cry and hides behind her mother, who comforts her with a hand on her head. Right after, he points to another widow and says her husband was crushed by debris while protecting citizens. The pregnant woman just stares at him with a blank expression amidst the destruction. She then places a hand on her belly, seeming to process the news she just received. The captain turns to a third woman and starts talking about her husband, but the curly-haired lady interrupts him, saying her husband wasn't that kind of person. So, the guy reveals he has a message from the deceased asking her to pay the tab he left at the brothel. The woman hides her face in her hands and shouts that he's a scumbag. She then gets up furiously and asks why he's doing this. The lady grabs our protagonist's clothes and demands to know the real cause, even if her husband was trash. The guy keeps a smile on his face, but his expression contorts in pain from the beating he took. Marie approaches his desk and asks why he kept lying even while being beaten. Without answering, our protagonist remains focused on his work, writing on a piece of paper. The advisor walks away calling him crazy, while he remains at his makeshift desk amidst the rubble. With her back to our protagonist, Marie says that if they're angry, they should take it out on her, as she is his superior and backer. She then turns with a confused expression, not understanding the guy's attitude. Sitting at his desk, our protagonist begins to explain the reason for his actions. With a determined look, he says he just didn't want to dismiss the people's passing with just some made-up excuse. The scene shifts to our protagonist looking at his locker and realizing his colleagues are bullying him as he touches a bloody handprint on the door. In a classroom, the other members of the 6th squad are just messing around and not taking anything seriously. 2 squad mates mock him while he eats, and one of the elf girls stares at him with a look of contempt. Hammond approaches and tells the captain to hang in there, as everyone is just a little frustrated but will calm down soon. Turns out, that old man is Hammond, and he used to be a big shot known as the Greedy Miser, but after fighting with the nobles and being abandoned by his wife and son, he mellowed out. The blue-haired woman offers to investigate the culprit for him and asks if they should give them a proper punishment. This beautiful lady is named Melito, and not even Marie knows her full story, but there are rumors she was a call girl and got in through connections. Looking at the woman, our protagonist thinks she is definitely wonderful. With that, the guy holds up one of his vandalized uniforms and says he understands what they're both saying. With a serious and determined look, he continues his thought, and he finishes the thought by saying that he is not okay with the situation at all. Because of this, he approaches 2 colleagues who were laughing and smacks one of them on the back of the head. With a mocking look, the guy says their laughter is starting to become contagious. The man who is hit turns with eyes red with fury and calls him a scumbag. Then, he rips his clothes, revealing a muscular body, and shouts, asking if the captain thought he wouldn't fight back. All the other squad members are completely shocked by the scene. The brute then charges at our protagonist, ready to attack. At this, our protagonist just picks his nose and comments that the demon queen sent him to clean up the bombing mess, but the man in front of him looks like the culprit. The man stops his attack and holds the guy's hand, saying it's not appropriate for him to pick his nose with his own hand. The captain turns to Melito and asks what crime would apply in a case like that, and she replies, at the very least, the execution of his entire family. The brute is completely terrified by the possibility. Our protagonist then lands a powerful kick on the man and asks if it was him. Lying on the floor in a destroyed room, the man desperately shouts that it wasn't him. Furious, the guy points to the vandalized locker and asks what that is. Then, crying, the man denies it again, and our protagonist just says he understands. With that, the captain turns to the rest of the squad and tells them to say who the suspect is. The brute then points to one of his colleagues, who is calmly eating. The guy who was calmly eating is shocked to be pointed at. At this, our protagonist delivers a hard slap to the accused's face, and he continues to beat the same squad member relentlessly. Soon after, a blonde elf also gets a slap from the captain. The violence continues, and one of the blonde elf girls is the next victim. One of the members then points to another who is eating noodles and says it's definitely him. The captain then asks the reason for the accusation. The guy replies that it's because he hasn't been hit yet. Our protagonist agrees with the logic and slaps the last suspect. He then looks at his hand and complains that it's starting to swell. With everyone hurt, he thinks that if he hits everyone, it will be fair. Hammond says this is just picking a fight with everyone, but the captain says what's important is something else. He then kicks a chair and says it doesn't matter who the culprit is. With that, he steps on a bench and shouts that he is not satisfied with the situation. Under a spotlight, the guy opens his arms and announces that for now, he will be generous and forgive whoever played the prank. Melito watches him from afar and thinks that he is a very interesting man. Our protagonist then reflects that the more aggressively he acts, the more everyone believes he is the Demon Queen's favorite. Soon after, he wonders where Griffono has gotten to since he's been beating everyone up and the elf still hasn't shown up. The scene changes completely and a red and white mushroom is seen on the ground. Turns out the mushroom is on Griffono's nose, who is on the ground, crying in despair. In a field full of giant mushrooms, a white-haired demon named Astate uses the elf's body as a golf tee. Astate then swings his club with all his might and hits Griffono square on the head. At the scene, the demon complains that Griffono is so useless he can't even serve as a simple golf tee. Desperate, the elf begs for mercy from his lord Astate. In response, the demon simply stomps on his head with force. Astate introduces himself as the 10th in line for the throne and questions if a golf tee is allowed to move on its own. Terrified, Griffono stammers that it's not. Suddenly, Astate looks to the side and shouts, "Bingo!" as a mushroom projectile flies through the air. The projectile hits a bald elf dead on, whose body is covered in colorful mushrooms. In front of giant mushrooms, a voice says that if he hadn't offered the mother tree of the elves, he would already be done for. With that, the two elf girls from the 6th squad approach Astate and ask him to calm down. They try to intercede for Griffono and ask the demon to find it in his heart to forgive the elf. One of them adds that in return, they would do anything. The white-haired elf then opens her shirt in a gesture to seduce him. Astate just stares at her and asks if they would really do anything. So, the two approach the demon and confirm they would do anything. He then grabs both of their heads and says they will compensate him with their bodies, and with brutal force, Astate smashes their heads together in a fatal attack. Seeing the scene, Griffono desperately shouts the names of his aunt and older sister. Astate stands over the bodies of the two elves, holding their hair. A stained glass window then shows that demons possess the longevity of elves, the technology of dwarves, the physique of beastmen, and the magic of elementals. Another stained glass window reveals that they also have the growth potential of humans and that they are the perfect life forms created by the fusion of these 5 races. At this, Astate declares himself the 10th son created by the Demon Queen Mother herself. Astate says that even though they are royal-blooded elves, to him, they are nothing more than insignificant insects. The blonde elf comments that she feels strangely light and wonders why she is still alive. Griffono hangs upside down and begs Astate to punish him instead of them. The bold elf shouts that they are the only family he has left. At the scene, Astate looks thoughtful. Suddenly, the demon starts to cry and says how inviolable it is. He comments that although Griffono is the successor of the elven race, his family doesn't hate him. On the contrary, they tried to sacrifice themselves to protect him. Full of rage, Astate shouts and wonders why he can't become a Kingforge since he is also a child of the mother. An explanation reveals that the Kingforges are 9 great demons created by the Demon Queen during the era of the Great Conquest. In other words, they are the first-generation demons. From there, the Kingforges created the 9 great armies through blood contracts, and these are the second-generation demons. The second-generation demons reproduced with other creatures on the continent, giving rise to the 3rd generation, but their power grew weaker and weaker. However, Astate is different because even though he is a second-generation demon, he was created by the Demon Queen herself after the unification of the continent, and so his power rivals that of the Kingforges. He then laments that even though they were born of the same parent, he is the only one who is not a Kingforge. Astate explains that his older brothers are just killing tools created by his mother, but he was born to build the new kingdom, while Griffono comments that it sounds like a soap opera. The demon then shouts that he is more favored than anyone. With his body covered in mushrooms, Griffono says the elves will surely find a way to make him a Kingforge. Astate then questions why he picked a fight with Suma. The elf stammers, not knowing what to say. The white-haired demon explains that the guy is just a mutt that his mother let loose to sweep up the scum, and that's why nobody likes him. With that, Astate grabs Griffono's head and lifts him into the air. He continues, saying that thanks to the elf, he has become the problem child who challenged his mother first, and with a final warning, he tells Griffono to use his head a little more in his next life. Astate prepares to deliver the final blow with a sword made of mushrooms. Suddenly, 2 doll-like maids appear and inform him that the restoration of the explosion site is complete. Astate replies that he's in an important moment, and that he's going to take out the elf first. One of the maids warns him that it will affect his contribution, points to the kingdom. With a sigh of frustration, the demon agrees and gives up on his action. Astate's head then opens up, revealing a red, pulsating mass. Then, he tries to put his head back in place but seems to have difficulty. The scene then returns to our protagonist and his companions. Hammond explains that since the captain beat up everyone, they were forced to go out to eat, and the guy says the bill is on him. Suddenly, the ground begins to shake, and the building they are in is lifted off the ground. Our protagonist screams in desperation as he sees a giant hand holding the building. Shocked, he wonders if the kingdom's construction technology is really that insane, but Hammond explains that this is the ability of the second-generation speaker, Lord Astate. Melito adds that he is Griffono's benefactor. Hearing this, the guy completely loses his appetite. Outside, people shout that it's a miracle and that Astate is the future of the kingdom and far superior to the Kingfridges. With a mushroom head, Astate asks how many points they have accumulated so far. One of the maids replies that it's 145,202 points, the highest score among all second-generation demons. The other maid comments that her brother's head is not going back into place correctly. With several hands trying to fit the mushroom head, Astate complains of pain. Astate complains that no matter how many times he tries, it still hurts and hopes he's not getting dumber. The maids then inform him that there is no more room for development in the royal capital. Shocked, the demon shouts and wonders if they have already finished building everything. One of the maids says they need another 10,000 points to match the lowest ranking of the Kingfridges, and that they need to execute the plan. Astate then complains that the only reason the Kingfridges have so many points is because they earned them during the era of the Great Conquest. He continues complaining that since they were born in a peaceful era, their work is nothing more than city building. With a determined look, he holds a model and says they need to save up little by little, one city and one castle at a time. But soon after, he despairs and shouts, wondering how many years that will take. The two maids console him and tell him to cheer up because the future belongs to him. Lying on the ground, Griffono thinks that Astate acts all cool and collected, but in reality, he's just a child starved for affection. Suddenly, Astate approaches the elf with a caring look. Griffono is completely speechless seeing the demon so close. The two maids watch the scene and comment on the two men clinging to each other. Astate then tells Griffono that he admires him like an older brother, and with a swift move, he vomits a sharp substance into the elf's mouth. A rainbow beam shoots out of Astate's eyes and hits Griffono's nose. The two maids comment that they are exchanging saliva, and that this is a game for adults. Astate's face is covered in the substance he vomited. Griffono then thinks he can still be saved, and with a bizarre expression, he declares that he loves Astate like a father. Suddenly, the elf starts spinning at high speed like a top, and Astate shouts, asking what he's doing. The spin is so strong that Griffono's body begins to come apart. He then emerges with a muscular and furious body. Astate looks at him with contempt and asks if he can't even suck up to someone properly. The two elf girls taken out by Astate begin to be covered by a strange substance. The substance spreads throughout the battlefield. The demon then tells Griffono to go and become fertilizer along with his family, just as he had planned from the beginning. An old-fashioned telephone starts ringing on top of a mushroom. One of the maids answers and asks who's on the line, but Astate says he doesn't want to see anyone at the moment. The maid then says that even though he is the fifth seat of the Kingfridges, her brother doesn't want to see him. Astate snatches the phone from her hand and desperately tries to talk to his sister. Furious, he asks the maid if the person on the line said anything else. The maid reveals that they said if he manages to take out Suma, they would recommend him for the Kingfridges. The other maid approaches and calls the demon brother. With a shout of excitement, Astate declares that his era has finally arrived, but the maid reminds him that he can't go until the fusion with the mother tree of the elves is complete. At this, Griffono, who is fusing with the tree, says he has a great idea. He continues, saying that if the demon can get the 10,000 points, he has a plan to get rid of Soma. Astate tells him to shut up with a snap of his fingers, and with a swift move, a mushroom hits Griffono's eye, making him shut up. Back at the restaurant, our protagonist is surrounded by soldiers in armor. Marie then sits at the table and reveals that according to a reliable source, he will meet his end tonight. Shocked by the news, the guy asks if it's really that direct. The advisor just replies that it's already been decided. With a dark look, Marie repeats the information she brought. Our protagonist then wonders if someone thinks they can take him out, the loyal dog of the demon queen herself. The advisor reveals that 1 hour and 33 minutes ago, Griffono's backer met with Astate, and 1 hour and 2 minutes ago, Astate's reconstruction work was delayed by 13 seconds. 51 minutes ago, the fifth seat of the Kingfridges called Astate for the first time, and the call lasted 21 seconds, and 10 minutes ago, she appeared before him. After hearing all this, our protagonist is speechless, and Marie asks if he has any thoughts. He then shouts and asks if, with her extraordinary information processing skills, she deduced that Astate is trying to take him out, but the advisor reveals she was just tapping Astate's phone, and the guy wonders if all the other information was really necessary. Marie then shouts that they need to go to a safe place immediately, and our protagonist questions who was dragging their feet. In front of an imposing castle, the guy asks where they are. The blonde woman explains that they are in Stonewall, a defensive facility built 200 years ago by a certain senior hero, and that now the kingdom has converted it into a safe house. With a wagging dog tail, our protagonist says that to him. She is the senior. Hammond then asks if she's talking about Raffle, the one the demon queen recognized recognized as the strongest in history. Marie confirms and explains that during the Great War of Unification that lasted 500 years, Raffle fought the Demon Queen alone for 300 years. Marie tells Hammond that for someone so good at history, he sure has led a pathetic life. She then turns to our protagonist and reveals that, for the record, the time he resisted was 45 minutes, the weakest in history. The guy replies that if the conclusion that the Demon Queen wins doesn't change, then he saved more time than anyone in history. In other words, he's the strongest. Hammond says he can still run away and that nothing good comes from small fish getting caught in a clash of titans. Melito then reminds the captain that if he weren't there, Grifano would have taken them out a long time ago. She also comments that back then the captain protected their dignity. In a flashback, Hammond asks if it's not a bad idea to make enemies of his own colleagues. 3 squad members bow and shout that they were wrong. Our protagonist then remembers that on his first day, the entire 6th squad was about to be taken out, but he wonders why the only woman was hanging from the ceiling. With a disapproving look, he calls them all perverts. At this, the 3 bow again and apologize profusely. The guy then tells them to stay in that position while he beats them until he's satisfied. Melito watches him from afar and thinks that he's actually really cool. The scene then shifts to gears turning at high speed, and our protagonist and the advisor going up the Stonewall Fortress in an external elevator. Below, Hammond, Melito, and Panda run and shout, asking why only the captain is running away. From above, the guy shouts back for Hammond and Melito to go home immediately. Hammond continues to run and tells Panda that since he's a bear, he doesn't need to try so hard to walk on 2 legs. Our protagonist then explains that a big shot from the kingdom is coming to take him out, and that if they get involved, they'll be completely finished. Hammond shouts that he knows that but that the captain shouldn't worry about them when he's heading straight for his own end. He continues running towards the elevator and questions why the guy is treating them like humans now when he's only seen them as sacrifices until now. With a desperate expression, the old man bellows that the captain is about to meet his end. Atop the fortress, our protagonist watches the night sky next to Marie and begins to reflect. He remembers when Amal tried to take him out and how she was surrounded by a powerful aura. So, he turned the tables on the goddess, and because of that, he has no regrets. From there, he recalls that the talking book also tried to eliminate him. He thinks that innocent people were dragged into the conflict, and that even if they try to blame him, he will never accept it. Back in the present, the captain pauses and continues his thought. Looking at his companions below, he reflects that if his comrades were to be lost because of him, he wouldn't be able to sleep at night, and with a bizarre expression, he bids farewell to his colleagues. At the same time, inside the barrier of the mother tree of the elves, a voice screams in despair. Grifano is completely shocked to see one of his relatives and shouts that she should be gone. A voice then asks if he thought he was the only survivor. Turns out it was Asti, and with a gold coin in his hand, he says he's going to buy Soma Kazuya's life. In front of a mountain of gold, he tells a hooded figure to take the blame for his crimes and asks if that's enough. The demon's request is simple: make it look like the person got revenge for Helga, since he has nothing to do with it. He then reveals the assassin's identity, the strongest of the old hero group and Helga's most loyal dog, named Aim. Meanwhile, the Stonewall Fortress stands out against the night sky. Inside, a blonde maid is being interrogated by guards, and they ask for the password. Surrounded by armed soldiers, she says she's just a humble servant and knows nothing. She then asks if they'll let her go if she does something, and one of the guards complains that she's mocking them and tells her to take it all off. But it was all a distraction, and she takes the opportunity to attack the guards, shouting, "Gotcha!" With a completely insane expression. She shouts that the bounty on Soma's head is hers. Suddenly, the barrel of a gun is pointed at the side of her head, leaving her completely surprised. A voice then says that in the name of the Demon Queen, she sentences the intruders to their end, and a green energy beam goes through the blonde maid's head. With that, the girl's body falls lifeless to the ground as a pair of brutes approaches her. The man with star-shaped glasses and blonde hair informs the chief secretary that he has taken care of the 37th assassin. Marie is relaxing in a chair with her feet up while our protagonist stands behind her, and she congratulates the so-called F1 on a job well done and tells him to clean the floor. On several monitors, the blonde man salutes and replies, "Yes, ma'am." At the scene, our protagonist regrets his decision and thinks that if he had known it would be like this, he wouldn't have sent Melito and the others away. He puts his hand on his face and laments that this is 1 point less for his chance to look cool, but the advisor gives a little smile and thinks that for her, this is 1 more point for being cool. Marie then holds the guy's face and asks if he wants to know who the 4 strongest are and decides to tell him. The scene then shows a man with spiky orange hair dragging another maid by the head. He reveals that they are genetically modified super soldiers and the last line of defense for the royal palace while counting the 38th victim. Another soldier with blue hair defeats a butler, and the advisor explains that they can only be mobilized by her and the Demon Queen as he counts the 39th. Soon after, a bald man stabs another butler who screams that it's unfair, and he counts the 40th victim. The four then join together and pose as the Forbidden Army F4. Back in the present, our protagonist kneels and shouts in gratitude for the Demon Queen's favor, promising to prove his worth, and saying it's an honor to be her dog. He finishes his oath, but the advisor interrupts him and asks if the Demon Queen knows that Astit is trying to take him out. The blonde woman then explains that she only mobilized the group because she felt sorry for him. With an insane expression, she gets closer and asks if he hasn't learned not to be so smug. Our protagonist shouts that it's a lie and remembers that the Demon Queen saved him when he was in danger. At his response, the two stare at each other in a tense and uncomfortable silence. Suddenly, the scene shifts to the blonde soldier grabbing one of the assassins and calling him a rat. The advisor then reminds him that he himself said he didn't know why Her Majesty showed up at the tax department. She gets even closer and questions if he also doesn't know why the place exploded, and the guy thinks he's finished. The blonde woman explains that since that incident, the Demon Queen, who has always worked hard, has isolated herself in the astronomy tower, and no one knows why, but our protagonist knows the reason and thinks she's probably looking for the Cloud Fortress, and that he noticed two things in the conversation between her and the book. The first is that the Demon Queen was once the administrator of the Cloud Fortress, and the second is that she's looking for a way to get back there. Marie then says she knows who is behind the tragedy but questions if there's anyone in this world worthy of making the Demon Queen move and asks in what capacity the guy was there. Our protagonist tries to say he doesn't know but gets a punch right in the face. The blow knocks him to the ground and the advisor stands over him, her fist still clenched. She then warns him that if he lies, she'll take the four away and he'll have to deal with Astit's assassins alone. Lying on the ground, our protagonist thinks that honestly, it wouldn't be a problem if he told the truth and that he might even be able to drag this curious woman into the mess. He then reflects that as the Demon Queen's secretary, knowing a secret that Her Majesty wants to hide is a sin in itself. At the provocation, Mary grabs him forcefully and shouts that they are comrades. The guy just gives a slight smile at her reaction. With his hand on his face, he says he wanted to relate to her as a normal person but didn't imagine it would lead to so much mistrust. So, he finally reveals the truth and says that on that day, the Demon Queen went there to save him. Completely shocked by the revelation, the advisor shouts, asking why. With his hand on his bruised face, our protagonist prepares to tell the whole truth. But before he can say anything, the scene becomes completely blurry. Suddenly, the entire room they are in detaches from the fortress and starts flying away. The blonde woman looks back and sees debris flying everywhere with the force of the impact. The room continues its trajectory through the night sky, moving further and further away from the fortress. Left behind, the advisor stands in the hole and wonders if the room just flew off. Outside, the guards desperately shout to protect the chief secretary and wonder where F1 is. The orange-haired soldier then grabs her and says they need to go to a safe place immediately, but the woman desperately shouts, asking where Soma Kazuya is. As the room flies through the sky, a scream echoes from inside, calling Marie a liar. A single false move could make everything collapse like a Jenga tower, and the Stonewall Fortress is about to have its key piece removed. Meanwhile, Astit and his maids watch a model of the site, treating it all like a big game. One of the doll-like maids analyzes the situation with her button eyes. The white-haired demon then points to a specific block in the tower, identifying the fortress's weak point. With a mop in hand, Astit prepares to clean up the mess that's about to happen. Turns out, the fortress's weak point is its ventilation ducts, and small, fluffy white creatures begin to move through the tunnels. Soon after, they emerge from a ventilation grate and invade the room. With that, our protagonist is completely covered by the creatures and panics. One of the little creatures even lands on his shoulder as if mocking him. Back at Astit's base, the other purple-haired maid draws a knife, and with a precise blow, she destroys the Jenga tower on the model. At the same instant, the Stonewall Fortress begins to explode from all sides. The room's floor shatters, and our protagonist is completely shocked by the destruction. At the white-haired demon's base, Astit destroys the Jenga tower with a precise blow. With that, our protagonist's face becomes completely blurry amidst the destruction. At that moment, the blonde soldier from F4 rushes forward at high speed to try to save him. His hand grabs the edge of the falling room with force. In this way, he manages to hold on and stop the fall for a moment, but the little white creatures cover his hand and completely destroy it. Because of this, the room starts flying through the night sky again, and the soldier screams in pain from the loss of his hand. Hiding in a bush, Melito, Hammond, and Panda watch the whole scene from afar with binoculars. Turns out, the three are having a picnic while watching the battle. With a skewer in hand, Hammond complains that they need to wait for the right moment to attack. At this, Melito mounts Panda, and they set off for the rescue, leaving the old man behind. Back at the base, Astit continues to play with the model as if nothing is happening. One of his maids then answers a call on an old-fashioned telephone. The white-haired demon snatches the phone from her hand and shouts furiously upon hearing the voice on the other end. He continues to listen to the call with an expression of surprise and anger, On the other end of the line, Marie's voice desperately shouts at the demon. Astit just flashes a completely evil smile upon hearing the advisor's voice. Back at the fortress, the F4 soldier turns to the hole and asks what she means. Meanwhile, the room continues to fly at high speed through the sky. Inside, our protagonist is thrown back by the force of the impact. He is thrown along with his chair, completely out of control. The momentum is so strong that he ends up being launched out of the room in a freefall. Soon after, the blonde soldier is also thrown into the air, and the two begin to fall towards the city. But even in freefall, the soldier extends his hand and shouts that he will save him. With a swift move, he manages to grab our protagonist by the hair. The pull is so strong that the captain's face contorts into a grimace of pain. The F4 soldier looks at him with a serious and determined expression. Turns out, the hand he used to hold on was the one that had been destroyed moments before. With that, the soldier uses some kind of propulsion to fly through the sky, carrying the guy. Our protagonist just screams in desperation as he is dragged through the air. The F4 soldier starts spinning at high speed and wraps them both in a kind of white bandage. With his eyes shut tight, our protagonist endures the impact of the spin. Suddenly, the two fall to the ground, and the captain realizes they are completely wrapped in toilet paper. With a confused expression, he observes the scene around him. One of the little white creatures then lands on his face as if mocking him. Upside down, the blonde soldier smiles at the guy while our protagonist screams in desperation. Meanwhile, a boy watches the flying room fall from the sky like a flaming meteor. The impact with the ground causes a gigantic explosion of dust and debris. The room then lands intact amidst a mysterious white foam. Back at the fortress, Marie uses a radio to talk to someone and asks what happened this time. With a serious look, she continues the conversation over the radio. A slight smile appears on her lips as she hears the response from the other end of the line. Turns out she's talking to Astit, who responds with a mocking smile. The flying room now looks like a giant monolith in a desolate desert. Suddenly, an explosion of blue energy erupts with overwhelming force. Suddenly, a torrential downpour begins to fall on the giant monolith. In the middle of nowhere, lying on the ground, our protagonist is completely soaked by the storm that appeared out of nowhere. The F4 soldier gets up in an action pose with lightning coming from his hand, looking ready for combat. But our protagonist just bows to the ground in reverence, completely soaked. With his body all contorted, he gives a thumbs up to the blonde soldier as if everything is fine. Because of this, the soldier picks him up and carries him on his back while the captain just clicks his tongue in annoyance. The scene then returns to Astit, who smiles into the phone with a satisfied expression. Back to the pair, the F4 soldier walks through the desolate landscape under the rain and lightning, carrying the guy. The blonde-haired soldier maintains a serious and determined expression on his face. Suddenly, they encounter a group of people, and we only see their brutes walking in the rain. A sea of black umbrellas appears before them, revealing an entire crowd. Our protagonist is completely shocked to see all those people gathered there. A man with an eye patch in the middle of the crowd shouts with an excited expression. In a quick flashback, we see the members of F4 defeating several enemies with ease. The blonde soldier then lifts the captain into the air, as if presenting him to the crowd. With a crowbar in hand, our protagonist positions himself on the shoulders of the F4 soldier. From there, the blonde man runs over the sea of umbrellas of the crowd. At high speed and with his hood up, he advances with electricity emanating from his hand. He then stops in an open field facing the army of assassins before him. Without hesitation, the soldier takes a step forward with all his might, and kicks one of the assassins, sending him flying. The F4 soldier finds himself alone in the middle of the fight, surrounded on all sides. One of the assassins in a suit then jumps with an umbrella, ready to attack the guy. But with a precise shot, the blonde man manages to intercept the attack and take down the enemy. Soon after, another assassin tries a surprise attack from behind with a knife. The soldier manages to grab the enemy's arm but ends up getting hit in the shoulder. Lying on the ground, the injured man shouts for the others to attack him in greater numbers. The man with the eye patch furiously shouts for them to continue the attack. At the order, the entire crowd charges at the two. Our protagonist then uses the blonde soldier as a support and hits two assassins at the same time with the crowbar. He continues to jump and attack, using the F4 man's head as a support. Amidst the combat, the guy spins in the air and attacks with the crowbar relentlessly. With a final jump, he hits another enemy with all his might. In the middle of the crowd, he appears with several crowbars in hand, as if he had multiplied. A red circle in the shape of a thumbs up forms around the fallen enemies on the ground. The man with the eye patch furiously shouts at the scene he is witnessing. Sitting on the soldier's shoulders, our protagonist congratulates him on a job well done. The two then prepare to continue the battle together. The F4 soldier spins in the air and lands several kicks on the enemies around him. Lying on the ground, our protagonist watches the scene with a look of admiration. Suddenly, the blonde soldier is hit by several colorful spikes. The spikes pierce his body and leave him completely immobilized. Then, he is bound by chains that appear out of nowhere. Completely tied up, the F4 soldier is vulnerable vulnerable in the middle of the battlefield. One of the assassins draws 2 hammers and prepares the final blow against the fallen soldier. With a perverse smile, the man with the eye patch watches the scene, certain of his impending victory. His victorious expression, however, turns to pure panic in the face of a twist. Turns out, our protagonist appears with a completely insane look on his face. Desperate, the other henchmen try to hold the chains that bound the F4 soldier. A lightning bolt illuminates the battlefield and reveals the captain's silhouette, causing chaos among the enemies. Even so, he ends up being knocked down, and a brute prepares to stomp on his head. The foot comes down violently, and the guy's blood splatters on the wet ground. Showing no mercy, the enemy continues to crush his face. With one last violent stomp, the captain is finally subdued under the storm. Suddenly, everything changes, and the scene of the beating is shown on a movie screen while 2 figures watch. The 2 people in the audience look a lot like our protagonist, and stare at the screen seriously. In disbelief, a third version of the guy stands up and shouts, wondering why he's always a loser. At that moment, the screen is interrupted by another character who complains about starting a flashback without his permission. To make things even more bizarre, the audience reveals more versions of him, one dressed as a sailor and another as a tourist eating popcorn. One of the versions of our protagonist covers his ears, completely annoyed by the mess. The tourist version then tells the sailor version that they don't have time for character development and that they need to focus on what's important. Faced with all that confusion, the original version of the guy puts his hands on his head, not knowing what to do. Even a cowboy version of him appears in the middle of the audience with a shocked expression. Back on the movie screen, the beating continues, and someone comments that his actions are suicidal. With that, the entire audience explodes and shouts suggestions like, "Take him out," "Take everyone out," or simply, "Stop biting him." Under a spotlight, the original version of our protagonist seems to have had an idea amidst all that chaos. Suddenly, all the other versions of him fall silent and stare at him, waiting to see what he will do. With his face covered by a shadow, he seems to have made a difficult decision. He then stands up and faces a weaker version of himself, telling him to stop feeling so high and mighty just because he's putting up a little resistance. So, he grabs the other version and violently drags him out of the chair. Some of the other versions watch the scene, not understanding anything, while others just cover their faces in shame. He then begins to explain that to survive, he needs to come back to life. His gaze fills with determination as he continues his speech, and he decides that he will use the ability he received from the goddess to turn the tables. With a furious expression, the original version of our protagonist shouts that it's time to use the hero summoning ability. He points with conviction and says he will bring all the legendary heroes of the past into the fight at once. Back in reality, the guy lets out a deafening scream that echoes throughout the battlefield. At that moment, his weaker version tries to hold him by the leg, begging him not to do it. The movie screen then shows a hammer falling, indicating that the final blow is about to happen. Outside, the assassin holds a huge sledgehammer, ready to crush the captain. At this, the man with the eye patch panics, realizing something is very wrong. The masked assassin raises the sledgehammer over his head and prepares for the devastating attack. Inside the cinema, the versions of the guy desperately scream, wondering what they can do in this situation. With a bloody face, our protagonist stares at the enemy with a defiant look. From there, an aura of power explodes from him with impressive force. The wave of energy is so strong that it sends the man with the eye patch flying and makes him drop his weapons. At the same time, his companion's star-shaped glasses begin to glow with a sinister red light. Suddenly, a giant safe falls from the sky and crushes the sledgehammer assassin without mercy. The blonde-haired man just watches the scene with his head down, completely shocked by the turn of events. At this, red light beams hit the man with the star-shaped glasses from behind. Another assassin is also caught by surprise and has his safe cut in half by a laser. The sudden attack leaves our protagonist completely confused, not understanding the origin of the power. Soon after, multiple energy rays shoot across the battlefield. A burst of light then sweeps through the crowd of assassins, leaving not a single one standing. When the smoke clears, a blonde man is kneeling on the now cracked and burning ground. The man with the eye patch was one of the few survivors, and is stuck in the ground, which seems to be melting. He looks around in desperation and sees that all his men have been completely annihilated. Terrified by the scene, he crawls away from the bodies scattered on the ground. At that moment, he notices that the captain is still down and seemingly defenseless. With a bloody face, our protagonist seems to have reached his limit, but with one last effort, he raises his head and faces his enemy. Before the man with the eye patch can do anything, a red laser goes through his head. Turns out, the shooter was the man with the star-shaped glasses, who now holds a laser gun in his hand. From a window in the Stonewall Fortress, he observes the battlefield, satisfied with the result of his mission. Over the radio, Marie furiously shouts at someone on the other end of the line, and the one who responds is Asti, who bursts out laughing, enjoying the situation. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, the blonde soldier observes a red laser beam falling from the sky. Soon after, several other energy rays begin to cross the skies in a deadly light show. From the top of the fortress, the advisor and another member of F4 watch the attack from a distance. The orange-haired man then comments in surprise surprise about the scale of the attack they are witnessing. Back on the ground, the F4 soldier holds our injured protagonist with a worried expression. Suddenly, the silhouettes of several mysterious warriors appear on top of sharp rocks under the storm. Watching everything from afar, a gentleman with a white mustache stares at the scene with a calm expression. He continues to observe the two young men amidst the battlefield devastated by the previous fight. In a flashback, we see an old photo of the same gentleman surrounded by several children in an orphanage. Another image from the past reveals that he became a rich and powerful man surrounded by dozens of employees. Back in the present, tears stream down his eyes as he wipes his face with a handkerchief, looking emotional. But suddenly, a giant hand appears and stops him from moving forward as he asks them to wait a second. Our protagonist then points to himself with his thumb and says he has something important to say. The guy starts to tell a story, and a film reel shows Helga's battle against the Demon Queen and how she was defeated. The gentleman with the mustache listens to everything with a serious and dark expression. The memory of a happier time appears, with him and his subordinates laughing together at a party. With his finger raised, our protagonist then declares that even with the defeat, there is still hope. At this, the gentleman's face turns completely red with anger at the guy's words. Our protagonist gives a mocking smile and is clearly amused by the old man's reaction, but the F4 soldier grabs him and starts shaking him violently to make him stop provoking. The anger is so great the gentleman gets a punch to the face, and blood goes flying everywhere. In a flashback, a young man runs towards the old man and begs him to teach him. Back in the present, our protagonist turns to the F4 soldier with a victorious smile. His expression then contorts into a bizarre grimace as he continues his speech. With a look of indignation, he asks why no one understands what he's trying to do. Suddenly, the blonde soldier is hit by several red laser beams once again. At that instant, a small plush cow appears out of nowhere and is identified as a level 1 sturdy cow. Soon after, a toy monkey also appears, completing the bizarre summoning. The monkey then points an axe at the cow, which has X for eyes as if it were gone. Turns out, the two dolls are hand puppets, and the one controlling them is the gentleman with the mustache, who puts on a little show right there. Back on the battlefield, our protagonist and the F4 soldier face the old man on top of a rock. The two are completely confused by the bizarre scene they are witnessing in the middle of nowhere. Suddenly, the gentleman with the mustache gets furious and shouts at our protagonist while holding the bull puppet. With a serious look, the captain seems to finally understand what is happening in this situation. The old man then asks the guy if he doesn't know he needs permission to do that. With a calmer expression, he seems to be talking to the bull doll in his hand as if it were a child. Our protagonist and the F4 soldier continue to not understand a single thing about this whole crazy situation. The gentleman with the mustache then explains something with a tranquility that makes everything even stranger. The scene changes completely and shows the blonde soldier trapped in a kind of recovery capsule. Back in the present, our protagonist furiously shouts at the old man about something. Desperate, the guy seems to be begging for something while the F4 soldier just watches the scene. The battlefield remains covered in bodies and blood everywhere, creating a desolate scene. With a serious and determined look, the gentleman with the mustache seems to make a final decision about the situation. With that, a group of legendary heroes is summoned, and one of them is a blonde swordsman accompanied by a girl with cat ears. Another part of the team appears and is composed of a masked fighter, a red-haired woman, a boy, and another fighter with a black mask. Back in the present, our protagonist and the F4 soldier are hoisted up by a rope while the gentleman with the mustache stares at them angrily from above. The blonde-haired man then takes control of a mechanism and starts pulling a lever with all his might, but the rope can't take the tension and begins to snap, sending sparks everywhere. With that, the captain is pulled up at high speed inside a wooden box and screams in desperation. The silhouette of a crane on the edge of the cliff reveals the dangerous height at which they are. Suddenly, the rope breaks and our protagonist falls in a freefall, trying to grab onto anything. The F4 soldier then tries once more to operate the crane's lever with a determined expression, but the effort is too great and the mechanism explodes into several pieces. The gentleman with the mustache just watches all the confusion with a satisfied expression on his face. By a hair's breadth, our protagonist manages to grab onto the edge of the cliff with an abyss right below. The blonde soldier then comes face to face with the giant skull of a dinosaur amidst the rain. Soon after, the summoned heroes jump towards him, ready for combat. One of the masked fighters then joins the gentleman with the mustache, and glowing runes appear on his back. With a cunning look, the gentleman with the mustache watches the scene unfold before his eyes. At this, the hero with the black mask faces the enemy with determination as glowing runes envelop him. But in the blink of an eye, he is completely defeated in a quick and brutal attack. Seeing the scene, the F4 soldier points his laser gun, which is still smoking from the last shot. Lying on the ground, the masked hero is completely bloody and out of the fight. Our protagonist then takes advantage of the distraction and positions himself behind the blonde soldier with a crowbar. Soon after, he takes the star glasses man's weapon for himself. The F4 soldier looks at him, not understanding what's happening, and why he did that. Meanwhile, on the edge of the cliff, the captain remains on the ground, trying to recover his strength. Suddenly, the hero with the red mask charges at high speed towards his target. His body then begins to glow with a golden aura, and the old man's face appears as a small icon on his head. With impressive force, he delivers a sequence of punches that the F4 soldier manages to block. The masked fighter then assumes a defensive stance, and his body becomes rigid like a golden statue. The blonde-haired man prepares for the next attack, facing the hero seriously. The two then face each other in a tense standoff, and the heavy-set hero begins to walk slowly towards him. With that, the F4 soldier takes advantage of the opening and hits the golden hero square in the mouth with the gun barrel. The man with the star-shaped glasses then uses the weapon as a lever to unbalance the masked fighter. Suddenly, a sharp sword flies at high speed towards them amidst the storm. The blade just grazes them, and the blonde soldier dodges along with the blonde swordsman in a chaotic ballet. With a determined look, the hero swordsman prepares to continue the combat against the man with the star-shaped glasses. Turns out, the F4 soldier's hand firmly grabs the leg of the fallen golden hero, and without any ceremony, he simply throws him over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes. Seeing the scene, the blonde swordsman shouts indignantly at the soldier's disrespectful attitude, but the man with the star-shaped glasses uses the golden hero's body as a weapon and throws him with all his might at the swordsman. Faced with the bizarre attack, he just lets out a mocking chuckle at the situation. Soon after, he comes face to face with the silhouette of another hero who stares at him from a distance. Turns out, the hero with the black mask has his whole body covered in dynamite, ready to explode. The bomb's fuse is already lit and burning quickly, approaching detonation. With a firm stomp on the ground, the human bomb hero prepares to launch himself in a suicide attack. At the same time, a red-haired heroine jumps into the air with the grace of a ballerina, creating waves in the rain. The F4 soldier faces the two heroes with a serious expression under the heavy rain. Suddenly, a gigantic explosion happens and engulfs the entire battlefield in a ball of fire. Watching the destruction from afar, the gentleman with the mustache just gives a slight, satisfied smile. Trapped on the edge of the cliff, our protagonist desperately screams upon seeing the scene. At that moment, a young man with blue hair also screams in panic upon witnessing the explosion. The captain continues to watch another, smaller explosion happen right in front of him. The confusion increases, and another man is thrown upside down in the middle of the fight. Elsewhere, a boxer hits a man so hard that he is thrown against the ceiling. One of the heroines then lands a powerful kick on an enemy and sends him flying. The other three members of F4 gather and strike a pose, but the blonde soldier's silhouette indicates he's no longer there. The blue-haired guy screams once more, completely distraught by the situation. Facing the heroine with her legs spread, the young man runs towards her, looking tiny next to her. Suddenly, a character's eyes go completely wide and red with fury or despair. With an evil laugh, the blue-haired young man seems to have completely changed his personality. The roller skating heroine then complains that she doesn't want to be stuck cleaning up the mess, just because she's ranked 10th. With eyes glowing with rage, a black-haired character faces his enemy with uncontrolled fury. The blue-haired young man then shouts with an animalistic expression and charges to attack. The skeletal leg of a monster stumps hard on the ground, preparing for a devastating attack. With impressive flexibility, the roller skating heroine lands a kick to the head of the blue-haired young man, who falls to the ground. Soon after, another enemy jumps into the air, and she kicks him with the same ease and precision. Blood splatters everywhere under the rainy sky and full moon. From afar, some people watch a coffin floating in front of the moon, and comment that the captain seems quite energetic. The blue-haired young man then mounts Panda, and shouts that he's going to help our protagonist while another man tries to stop him. The man with a box in his hands runs after them, complaining about Panda's speed, and saying he's going to help too. A map shows the path they're taking from Stonewall Fortress towards a quarry. Arriving at the location, they find a chaotic battle with several heroes, and the F4 soldier fighting fiercely. The two then come face to face with the red lightning that cuts through the sky and stare at each other amidst the rain and fire. With their faces covered by shadows, they find a man smoking and ask for permission to pass. The map now shows their route leaving the quarry and heading towards a forest. Arriving in the forest, they find the F4 group, and one of them kneels, begging for something. The orange-haired man from F4 and the blue-haired girl explain that they are allies. Meanwhile, Melito talks to Hammond, who has a strange halo around his head. From there, the whole group runs at high speed through the forest under the heavy rain. From another angle, the team continues its advance through the dense woods, being watched by someone from above. Suddenly, several of the summoned heroes jump from the trees to intercept them. A full-blown brawl breaks out, and one of the heroes prepares a devastating stomp on our protagonist's companions. At this, Hammond shouts for them to prepare for the attack and use their defensive weapons. Elsewhere, the gentleman with the mustache climbs a rock wall and seems to be doing a countdown. Soon after, a gigantic explosion happens, and the old man covers his ears from the force of the impact. Shocked by the scene, Hammond wonders who those people are. At that moment, the gentleman with the mustache crouches amidst the rocks, seeming to prepare for something. Suddenly, a jet of water sprays right in front of him while he remains crouched. With that, the old man gives a completely insane and satisfied smile at the situation. The scene changes, and the orange-haired man from F4 is on the ground, completely defeated. Finally, the focus shifts to the intense gazes of two characters, one with a furious expression and the other totally calm. The black-haired heroine stares at Hammond up close and says she won't fight. The old man remains on the ground as the fighter stands up and stands over him. In his thoughts, Hammond tries to negotiate for his life, saying his relationship with the captain isn't that deep and that he can find a way to escape. He continues his mental plan and suggests the others go after Soma Kazuya, and he finishes by saying that for that very reason, they should give up on him and go defeat the captain. At this, the roller skating heroine lands a powerful kick on another enemy, while the old man remains seated with his eyes closed. From there, he remembers a happier moment with his family. With his head down, the memory of the past seems to weigh on him. Back in the present, Hammond raises his face with a completely different and determined expression. With that, the old man stands up and opens his arms to block the heroine's path, but the fighter doesn't hesitate and lands a kick right in his face with all her might. The impact of the roller skate on his face is so strong that blood goes flying everywhere. Seeing the scene, the blue-haired woman is completely shocked and horrified. The blow sends Hammond flying back, and he soars through the air, completely defeated. Finally, the heroine lands on the ground with so much force that it cracks the soil around her. Melito kneels beside Hammond, who is on the ground, and screams in pain. From a distance, the scene shows the blue-haired woman trying to help her defeated companion. In a flashback, we see the two talking in a restaurant. The blue-haired girl eats a piece of meat with her cheeks full. The old man then tells her that, because of her past as a courtesan, she may not know what a man's pride is. Back in the present, the black-haired heroine lets out a completely insane laugh. She then prepares to stomp on Hammond's head and says he's not worth it. At the scene, Melito murmurs something with a serious expression. Her gaze fills with fury upon seeing the heroine's attitude. Suddenly, Panda appears behind the fighter with a menacingly glowing red eye. With smoke coming from its mouth, the squad's mascot faces the enemy seriously. Panda's imposing presence seems to intimidate the heroine, who has her back to him. The fighter then turns around with a surprised expression upon noticing the animal's presence. With her leg muscles flexed, she prepares to attack Panda with all her might, and without hesitation, the heroine lands a powerful kick right in the mascot's face. Panda simply stops the powerful kick with one of its paws, leaving the heroine suspended in the air. The fighter is completely shocked to see that her strongest attack had no effect. From there, the squad's mascot grabs her leg with both its paws with impressive force. Without wasting time, he starts slamming the woman on the ground repeatedly, as if she were a rag doll. Melito then tells Hammond that after seeing that, she'll never be able to look at pandas the same way again, while the mascot jumps into the air to make a basket with the enemy. With a bloody face, the black-haired heroine falls to the ground, completely defeated. The blue-haired woman approaches her with a gun in hand and asks if she has any last words. Even injured, the fighter faces her opponent with a look full of hate and defiance. The scene then shifts to a night with a full moon, and a gunshot echoes through the forest. Elsewhere, the gentleman with the mustache is next to a red-haired woman amidst a scene of fire and destruction. The camera focuses on the red-haired girl's ear, who seems to be listening to something attentively. In front of a gigantic explosion, the woman comments that she heard a shot. The old man just looks at her with a sad and thoughtful expression amidst the embers. In front of the ashes, he remembers two silhouettes from the past that seem to have been important to him. The scene ends by showing the face of a new mysterious character wearing a gas mask. With that, a pink-haired girl with cat ears stares at the scene with a mischievous expression. So, the guy in the gas mask carries her on his back as he runs, surrounded by a blue energy barrier and a ring of fire. His feet then step on a ground covered in lava and flames. Before them, a giant black sphere rests in the fiery landscape while a figure in a top hat walks in the distance. To make things even weirder, a baby in a wrestling mask crawls across the flaming ground. Suddenly, a blue energy slash flies towards an explosion while a voice shouts to wait. The girl with cat ears then talks to the guy in the mask as he continues to move. The blue energy slash then curves in the air and veers away from the explosion on the horizon. At that moment, a blonde man with half a metal face observes the scene, and his robotic eye begins to glow. His robotic hand also has an eye that glows with an intense orange light. From there, a sniper scope locks onto the two young people, and the girl hugs him in fear. The cyborg's eye then accumulates a large amount of energy, preparing to fire. Because of this, a ring of orange light surrounds the two and seems to protect them from the attack. The pink-haired girl then grabs the guy's hair and tries to rip off his mask while he screams in pain. She continues to pull his hair with a desperate expression on her face. Suddenly, a gigantic fist descends from the heavens towards a lone figure on the ground. With a desperate scream, the figure is crushed by the devastating impact that cracks the ground. However, a small character with a white scarf appears and stops the attack with just the tip of his finger. At this, a group of heroes reveals themselves, including number 2 with level 47 super senses and number 4 with an indestructible level 45 diamond body. Amidst the flames, the silhouette of a man in a top hat appears with his eyes glowing red. The baby in the wrestling mask then appears again with a calm expression in the face of the destruction. A voice then says that it's counting on them as a blue energy slash flies towards the explosion. With their backs to the scene, the red-haired woman and the gentleman with the mustache observe the destruction. Suddenly, a hand covered in blue digital patterns lunges forward to gouge out the eyes of one of the heroes. At this, Melito points her gun with a serious and determined expression. A muscular purple-haired woman full of scars appears over the defeated fighter and makes a peace sign. With her arms crossed, she looks at the scene with an air of superiority. The blue-haired woman continues with her gun raised and asks if it's her, but the purple-haired woman points to the old man, who is rolling on the ground right behind. Meanwhile, Panda just eats his bamboo peacefully, not caring about the confusion. The purple-haired woman continues with her arms crossed in a mocking look. Her gaze narrows with an air of superiority and confidence. At this, the gentleman with the mustache furiously shouts at her. From there, the heroes begin to argue among themselves, and the red-haired woman points at the blonde swordsman. She then challenges the swordsman to fight without his sword, while the old man just watches the scene. A full-blown brawl breaks out among the heroes while the gentleman with the mustache just watches from nearby. The red-haired woman furiously shouts while the little girl bites the blonde swordsman, who is being held in a headlock. Amidst the confusion, the masked fighter consoles the red-haired girl while the old man walks away. The three heroes then face the gentleman with the mustache with a serious expression. Suddenly, an explosion happens and destroys a rock wall next to them. The baby in the wrestling masked body is stuck in the rock, and he asks if he's strong or not. The red-haired woman then grabs the masked fighter by the collar of his mask in anger. The baby's body remains stuck in the rock, leaving only his legs out. The gentleman with the mustache then opens one eye with a cunning and malicious expression. Finally, the scene shows the full moon shining in the night sky, ending the confusion. The purple-haired woman hugs Panda affectionately and says he's cute. Suddenly, the view shifts, and someone points a gun directly at Panda, who is sitting in the distance. The hand holding the pistol trembles slightly but remains steady on its target. Turns out, the one with the gun in hand is Melito, who faces her target with a serious expression, sweating coldly. With her finger on the trigger, the scene turns black and white, indicating that the shot is imminent, but the bullet is stopped in mid-air by two fingers that catch it with ease. With her head down, the blue-haired woman seems to feel defeated or ashamed of the situation. Meanwhile, the black-haired heroine bursts out laughing, finding the whole scene hilarious. She then strikes a bizarre pose on the ground and continues to laugh uncontrollably. Lying on the ground, the old man is completely shocked and doesn't understand the madness that is happening. The blue-haired woman then approaches Hammond, who remains defeated in the middle of the clearing. With a slight smile on her lips, she seems to be trying to reassure her squad mate. The old man looks at her with a surprised expression, not expecting that gesture. Suddenly, Panda bites the purple-haired woman's arm with all his might, but even being bitten, she just gives the mascot a little punch on the head, as if she were playing with him. Panda blushes at the purple-haired woman's affection and strikes a cute pose. The muscular woman shouts with excitement at the cuteness of the squad's mascot. At the scene, Melito says that as a former courtesan, she understands a man's pride, so a giant pistol with orange details appears before her. Hammond is completely shocked and doesn't understand where that huge weapon came from. The purple-haired woman is also surprised and faces the situation seriously. Her image then appears on a kind of monitor or scope, as if she were trapped. Soon after, a hand in white gloves draws a silver revolver, and the weapon is pointed directly at the head of the fallen black-haired heroine. Facing the defeated fighter, Melito points a smaller gun and says that now it's her turn to choose. The scene then shows the furious eyes of the purple-haired woman and then a pair of sad eyes of a younger version of her. In a flashback, the little girl is lying in bed with deep dark circles, looking scared. She then looks at the person standing beside her bed. A man with a gun embedded in his head and a bloody face reveals that her parents are gone. Finally, the gentleman with the mustache appears as a teacher in front of a blackboard that says, "Survival of the fittest." An illustration of a leopard holding a rabbit shows the harsh lesson the world teaches about the law of the jungle. So, in a classroom, the younger version of the purple-haired woman learns this lesson from the gentleman with the mustache. Back in the present, the muscular woman defends Panda and lands a powerful punch that causes an explosion. From there, Melito shoots the black-haired heroine, who is hit square in the chest. Even injured, the fighter just opens her mouth in a scream of fury or pain. The purple-haired woman then prepares to block a giant energy projectile coming her way. Melito analyzes the purple-haired woman who has her arms crossed and begins to think about about what kind of person she really is. The blue-haired woman remembers the black-haired heroine being defeated and imagines that the muscular woman probably values friendship. Then, she recalls Hammond lying on the ground and supposes that the warrior also values justice. The girl then sees the heroine hugging Panda and concludes that she loves life, being just a good person who lost her way. With a confident smile, Melito believes that the muscular woman will take a risk to help her allies, and this will give Panda an opening to attack. But the blue-haired woman's expression changes completely to one of absolute shock. Turns out, the purple-haired heroine didn't dodge the giant projectile, and actually blocked it with her own arms. The attack reveals itself to be a beam of bamboo that shatters on impact, but she didn't do what Melito expected. The warrior didn't try to stop the shots that hit the black-haired heroine, and the blue-haired woman thinks that if it were her, she would have saved everyone. The girl faces the warrior's dark silhouette and realizes that she's throwing everything away. At the scene, Melito wonders why she's acting this way. With the black-haired heroine lying in a pool of blood, the blue-haired woman shouts that the warrior could have saved her. The purple-haired woman coldly replies that the other was weaker, and there was nothing to be done if she was taken out. Indignant, Melito shouts and questions why she blocked the first attack then. While the heroine just puts her hand on her head, the purple-haired woman remains silent, with the bandages covering part of her face. The warrior then remembers a flashback where her teammates celebrate her birthday, but she doesn't even know what the word means. Back in the present, the purple-haired woman tells Melito that next year, she'll have to buy her a meal. The heroine then closes her eyes and gives a forced smile, her face covered in bandages. With the same expression, tears begin to stream down her eyes, showing her internal conflict. Furious with her own feelings, the warrior screams in anger and punches a rock wall with all her might. She then falls to the ground and shouts that if she saves the other heroine, the values that have supported her until now will shatter, and the faces of her friends will appear in the darkness again. Seeing the scene, Melito covers her mouth, completely shocked, and thinks that the woman has gone insane. The warrior approaches Melito and shouts that the weak are food for the strong and that the other heroine deserved to be taken out, and questions what would happen to all the people she's ended if she saved her. With that, the purple-haired woman points at the girl and accuses her of tormenting her with magic attacks or some curse on her brain. Faced with this madness, Melito begins to cry and apologizes to Hammond for wasting the chance to live that he gave her. Suddenly, a hand grabs the blue-haired woman's collar from behind. With a violent pull, Melito is thrown back, and in the background, Hammond appears standing next to one of his companions. But before the girl hits the ground, Panda catches her in his arms, saving her from the fall. Seeing the scene, Hammond shouts for Panda to run as fast as he can and not to look back under any circumstances, while the mascot holds Melito by her mouth. With a completely insane look, the purple-haired woman appears behind the old man and shouts for them all to perish together. Suddenly, the other three members of F4 appear and charge at the warrior while Hammond faces her with a determined look. The orange-haired man then says that to face a level 50 powerhouse, his blue-haired companion completes, saying that they need to use the light sealed in their bodies, and the bald one finishes, saying that otherwise, they won't be able to defeat her. But elsewhere, a strong man who fought all three alone was watching the night sky. Lying on the ground, hero number 9 and level 42 Super Boxer comments that the moon after the rain is beautiful, and even while number 8 and Melito were talking, he was fighting the 3 members of the Forbidden Army alone. The full moon shines brightly in the sky, and he comments that the weather has finally cleared up. Suddenly, he comes across a stone pillar and notices that there's something written on it. He approaches and feels that the message was addressed to him, and the writing says, "To you, 250 years from now." The message then reveals that the name of the writer is Raffle, an incredible senior. Our protagonist touches the inscription and reads that when he saw that, about 250 years would have passed since Raffle's passing. With a cold sweat on his face, the guy is completely shocked and wonders if a ghost wrote that message. He crouches down to continue reading, and the message says that probably in his era, Raffle is known by a name that violates advertising laws. The name is then revealed as the strongest hero, and our protagonist panics, remembering that he has an assassin below the cliff and a ghost above. But the message reassures him, saying not to be afraid, because he is not a ghost and just has a little bit of foresight, knowing that a junior would come there 250 years later. Our protagonist then shouts indignantly, wondering how much of a show-off Raffle was in life to do something like this even after he was gone. In front of a giant statue, our protagonist reads the message that says to ignore that because scammers always call themselves gods, and that the part about the strongest hero is probably a lie. With that, the guy steps on a glowing inscription on the ground. The full moon illuminates the night sky and the surrounding rocks. Turns out, the moonlight revealed an entire path covered in the same glowing writing. Shocked, the captain realizes there are more messages on the ground, moment, and one of them says that as a veteran, Raffle will give him a prophecy, warning that he will meet his end soon. Our protagonist just bursts out laughing and mocks, saying he's been hearing that since the end of chapter 13. He then observes the explosions and red lasers in the distance and comments that F1 is making a huge mess down there, plus he can hear gunshots from the forest. Suddenly, the guy panics and shouts that maybe there's a way to survive written there too. He throws himself on the ground, which starts to crumble, and desperately shouts, asking what the rest of the message is. Amidst the debris, a giant number 5 made of stone appears on the ground. The guy is confused by this and wonders what the number 5 means. The rock then changes to the number 4, and he begins to wonder if it's some code for a survival route. Then, the number 3 appears and our protagonist starts to sweat, thinking it can't be. With the appearance of the number 2, he goes into total despair and realizes that this is a countdown. Finally, the number 1 appears on the ground, indicating that time is up. Standing on the countdown numbers with the full moon in the background, our protagonist desperately shouts that this is way beyond the level of a prophecy. He then begins to reflect and wonders what he would be thinking if he had only 5 seconds to live. With his eyes closed and surrounded by autumn leaves, he questions his life, and then he opens his eyes and wonders if he would have any regrets. With a burst of anger, the guy smashes a rock and shouts that he has a mountain of regrets, and that if he doesn't even believe in science, why would he believe in a superstition like that? And says that Raffle must have come to avenge the goddess, and that her faction is just a bunch of useless people who can't fight outside their own territory. With a completely insane look, our protagonist shouts that he doesn't give a dang about a prophecy, and that things will never go according to plan. Suddenly, he stops and realizes he hit something on the ground. His white gloved hand touches a crack in the ground, and he wonders if it's a box. With his eye wide, he reads another text that says that a magnificent spirit of rebellion is the path to survival that he has earned. The box then reveals itself with a skull and crossbones symbol and the phrase, "Piece of advice." The scene then shifts to the full moon shining in the night sky and says that meanwhile, around the same time, amidst a scene of fire and destruction, a man in a leather jacket and blonde hair walks with flames around him. One of the members of F4 faces him and asks why he still fights since he's just a hired gun. With the royal capital in the background and several bodies scattered on the ground, the voice continues, saying for him not to forget that the kingdom's elite could arrive as reinforcements at any moment. The blonde assassin walks calmly over the water, but his reflection reveals a sinister creature with glowing red eyes. At the scene, the blonde assassin comments that the Forbidden Army member has suddenly become quite talkative. He continues to face his opponent, his star-shaped glasses reflecting the scene. Back to the other scene, the gentleman with the white mustache shouts that if what he says is true, then he is wrong. With that, the old man's group shouts, calling for the royal elite and declaring themselves the villains who are the last of the goddess's faction, and that they are going to take out the demon queen's dog. He screams desperately and asks what's taking so long, telling them to hurry up and get them. The battlefield remains covered in flames under the light of the full moon. The blonde assassin just observes the scene with his half-robotic face. The gentleman with the white mustache faces him with a cunning look full of hidden intentions. Pointing at the soldier, the old man asks if he still doesn't get it and reveals that it's an open secret in the demon queen's faction that Soma is just a pawn and that no one besides Marie cares about him. At the revelation, the soldier is completely shocked and stammers that they are here. With a satisfied smile, the gentleman with the white mustache asks him once more. He then questions where his elites are as the two face each other from a distance in a desolate field. With his hair on fire, the assassin says that any second now. Suddenly, the assassin turns with a surprised expression, and his robotic eye glows intensely. In the distance, a red annihilation beam rises into the sky, and someone wonders if one of their comrades has found a powerful enemy. Back in the fight, the blonde assassin is bound by chains held by two of the summoned heroes. The masked fighter faces him and says he let his guard down. With that, the heavy-set masked hero flies towards him, while the assassin thinks that even if his power is average, when he turns to metal he becomes as heavy as real metal and prepares to crush his opponent. Seeing the scene, the red-haired woman shouts for numbers 5 and 6 to hurry up. At that moment, another summoned hero creates a giant blue energy hand. Meanwhile, the blonde swordsman meditates in the air and summons a gigantic flaming sword. The energy hand hero then says he had an inspiration in the last fight and that if he uses his giant hand to wield the swordsman's holy sword, the two shout together that it would be the ultimate combination. The blue energy hand then grabs the flaming sword while the heavy-set hero complains about being dragged into it. With a shout of excitement, the gentleman with the white mustache declares that he will defeat the Forbidden Army and Soma, and that the strongest among them will be the next hero. Back in the combat, the heavy-set hero manages to pin the assassin to the ground with all his weight. Pinned and immobilized, the assassin thinks that if they use the annihilation beam, then that secret can no longer be hidden. With the heavy-set masked hero on top of him, the blonde assassin is completely lost in thought, and his opponent wonders what the heck that is. Meanwhile, elsewhere under the same full moon, soon, the scene changes location completely. Heroine number 7 was climbing a vertical cliff, carrying number 3 on her back. They continued to climb the rock wall, avoiding the F1 group and silently aiming for the top. Their goal was to reach the summit to launch a surprise attack against Soma. Suddenly, our protagonist pokes his head out of the box and notices something strange in the air.